Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Fairfax Town Center Plan Workshop. And this is, a long-awaited workshop. I mean, the center of Fairfax is the heart of our town, and a lot of people care about it. It's really good to have it even more functional than it already is, which is tongue-in-cheek, of course. Anyway, so this is a bunch of different meetings at once. It's an official council meeting because I think there's 3 members of the council here, so we've got a quorum. David, I guess maybe David and Barbara are here, and Renee and Peter are not. Is that right? So and I'm John Reed. I'm your vice mayor. I'm standing in for Renee, your mayor, Renee Goddard. And also, the Planning Commission is here. Maybe the Planning Commission, can you introduce yourselves stand up and say who your name? That's Norma.
I'm also the vice chair this year of the Planning Commission.
Yeah, so we don't have a quorum on that. But, and is this any other meetings? I don't think so. Affordable Housing Committee is also here. And Barbara, are you both the council and the Affordable Housing? Anybody else from Affordable Housing? Yes, Tony? And I think that's it, right? I'm sorry? Oh, GPIC also. I guess I'm on GPIC, so. Okay. Okay, and that's it? That's all the committees? Okay, this is. I'm sorry. Okay, well, great. Well, so that's the formality, the legal part of the meeting there. And I should turn it, do you want to say 2 things, or should I hand it over to? Okay, here we go. So thank you very much for coming, everybody, and this should be interesting, and hopefully we'll get a lot of good input for the coming look of our town.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, I'm Garrett Toy, I'm the town manager, and before I introduce Jim and Larry, a couple of things. One is we had to do all the meetings and quorums and check on that just so those different committees could participate if there's a quorum that can meet the Brown Act requirements, although it appears only the council has a quorum, so we'll see if other members show up. And then later on for this evening, as we move through this, first of all, welcome to this is the first of 3 planned workshops on the town center element. What we're here is this is the first one tonight, and Jim will go into that more detail, but this is kind of more of a review of existing policies and plans that exist. Ultimately, for your town center plan, I see it more as a guide for really creating that sense of place for the community. We're not talking about any zoning issues this evening or anything like that. Really, it's just start the discussion as it has to get your input on what things really future workshops would cover in terms of the plans and so on. So my role this evening is I'll take notes. I'll also facilitate if we kind of get stuck on things. Other than that, really what I'm going to do is turn it over to Jim Moore. He's our planning building services manager, and Larry Kennings, who's our consultant, and they're the ones that are working on the town center plan.
Thanks, Garrett. So there's still a little pizza, I think, back there, or a little cheese bread. Glad everyone got that. And in a moment, Larry's going to give you a little introduction in terms of what is in the town center elements narrative part. The town center element, it was an optional element in the town's general plan. There are 7 elements required by law, and this was an optional element that the town, in its wisdom, decided to create. And within that town center element, it calls for the creation of a town center plan. There is no plan yet. That's what we're all here for, is to develop a plan. So the game plan going forward to create a town center plan is for 3 public workshops, the first of which is tonight. And what I'm going to be doing And what we did in preparing the workbook that is on the town's website right now, if you go to townoffairfax.org, was to package all the existing town policies, primarily the town center element, and within it, the goals, objectives, programs, and policies section. And then Larry's going to give you a little bit of the narrative at the beginning of that meat of the town center element, and also touch on some of the issues that were raised in the appendix. And then I'm going to go through, step by step, what's in the workbook that's available online. It's on the wall back there. And then at the end of going through the workbook, we're going to share with you what we think are the main issues or problems and opportunities, and we want you to tell us whether or not you think they're right, you think they're wrong, or you think that something's missing. And after tonight, we'll have a succinct list of these issues and opportunities. And when we come back for the second workshop on Saturday, August 6th, we'll be here a little bit longer. We'll go from 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. And we'll do 2 series of what's called breakout sessions, where we'll have tables set up with materials, and they'll be focused, each table will be focused on different subjects. And teams will work in trying to address those issues or opportunities, and then reconvene in the main group, and then we'll do it all over again in that day after a nice lunch break. Then after the second workshop, staff with some consultants and some experts like a traffic expert will go away and noodle your ideas that come out of the second workshop to test them, to see if they really work. You want to change an intersection, you want to move something around for loading truck zones or whatnot, staging area for bikes. How would that really work, you know, with hard drawings on the ground and specifics? And then we'll come back with refinements to your ideas, bottom-up process, in a third workshop on October 1st, Saturday, October 1st, and we'll meet a little bit less time then. We'll go 9 to 1. And then you all, again, hopefully some of you will make it through all 3 workshops. You all will look at the alternatives that we've sort of noodled out of your ideas and pick what are the preferred alternatives. And then after that third workshop, we'll go away and form a draft plan that hopefully we'll present to the town council in December, a draft. One of the decisions made by the town council about tonight and the next 2 workshops in developing a town center plan at this point is, even though the town center element calls for creating a managed parking plan for the town, we think that's worthy of focusing only on that after developing a town center plan. So we will talk about parking spaces or loading zones or the policy about no net loss of parking in the town center area. We'll talk about policies or particulars, but in terms of a managed parking plan, you know, paid parking and all that stuff that's very divisive, we're going to put that off to a later stage. Lastly, tonight we're broadcasting live. We're streaming live on the town's website. Community Media Marin is actually busy with other programming, but so we don't get to have their prime station. But we're streaming through our website. There'll be a recording of the event that will be posted on the website under the archived town council meetings, as always. So if you have friends that couldn't come tonight, they still can watch it, and they can still send in their email ideas about what they've heard. So this will live on after tonight. There's a chance for folks that aren't here to become involved. As we walk through the workbook, page by page, item by item, we're going to be reviewing all the town's policies, but I want to reiterate that we're here in a bottom-up process, a public workshop, to create a town center plan. We're not here to revisit the policies in the housing element, in the updated housing element that was adopted by town council last May. We're not here to discuss the zoning that's taking place to accommodate, address the policies in the housing element. We will be touching on the relevant sections of the housing element in regards to creating a town center plan. And we've also pulled out of the other body of the general plan other relevant sections within the land use, circulation, and conservation. And I'll be going through those briefly. But with that introduction, Larry, maybe you can walk us through some of the narrative and a little bit more background on the general plan stuff.
I'll go through the boring stuff. Well, thank you all for coming, and if you're here for a workshop on the housing element, you're in the wrong class, so.
And can I interrupt you for just a second?
No.
Let me, Larry is with LAK Associates in Sausalito. He is a consultant for the town, and he worked for 12 years with the General Plan Advisory Committee to create the general plan that was adopted in April of 2012. And I might add, it was the first complete general plan in the town of Fairfax's history. It's a wonderful blueprint. It was truly a bottom-up process that this gentleman led. So with that, I'm sorry.
That's okay, why don't I just give you my notes and you could do it. I'm going to repeat some of the things that Jim did say anyway. Thank you all for coming. I know you've got other stuff to do. And hopefully, well, thank God it's not a basketball night, because I've been to a couple of workshops lately where there's been 3 people in the room. We know your time is valuable, and I'm going to try to go through this stuff as quickly as I can and give you a little bit of background, and I'm going to go over mainly a lot of the pros that's in the town center element first, and then Jim's going to go into more detail. The state planning law requires all the towns and cities and jurisdictions to have a general plan, and they required us to adopt the general plan, and as you probably know, the general plan was adopted by the town council in 2012. The general plan lays out the goals and objectives for the town for its near and long-term future. As Jim said, there are 7 required elements for a general plan. Every jurisdiction has one that is either lists them out in 7 steps or combines different elements together. Those are land use, circulation, housing, safety, noise, open space, and conservation. And the GPAC worked on all of those elements, and as Jim had said, it was really a bottom-up plan. The people of this community drafted that general plan. The law allows, besides the 7 elements, the law allows each jurisdiction to do optional elements, is what they call them. Some jurisdictions will do an economic development element, some will do an urban design element. I should have asked people to put them on stun before we, that's all right. Everybody's got that ringertone. It could have been Stephen's phone. Anyway, the town decided that they wanted to do a town center element. In fact, it was the first element that the GPAC formulated, and it was done way before all the other elements, so it's got the longest history in the town. The policies that are listed in the general plan, in the town center element, are meant to implement the goals and the objectives, and Jim's going to run through some of those a little bit later. But the town center element includes policies, and I'm going to read them off as a list. Developing a vision for the downtown area, developing a town center plan, maintaining the character of the downtown, enhancing the village character, including the architectural style, preparing design guidelines and development standards, developing a pedestrian and bicycle circulation plan, evaluating Bolinas Road as a pedestrian area, developing a no-net loss parking program, creating bicycle and pedestrian connections to the residential neighborhoods, promoting public art, promoting locally owned businesses, considering daylighting the creeks running through the town, identifying the staging areas for trucks, and identifying staging area for bikes, and lastly was using renewable energy. And the town center element has an appendix, which is kind of a how-to to do some of these things. And that appendix includes a discussion of how to implement changes to the Elsie Lane, Bank Street, Broadway connections, ways to improve circular flow and better balance pedestrian and bike access to the town center, discussions to reduce noise and pollution, how to close Bolinas Road from LC to Broadway for pedestrian activities, how to increase the visibility of the pavilion, how to reduce congestion on the Broadway-Bolinas Road intersection, and how to eliminate queuing, which is lining up at the Sir Francis Drake Broadway intersection. Now on the wall, I hope you've had a chance to look at it. If you haven't, maybe you can do it afterwards, but are all the pages from the workbook Jim's going to describe, and all the policies and the goals and objectives are listed, as well as some of the important maps that are in the back by the door. So if you get a chance before you go home this evening, if you haven't already, look at that.
Are they all online too?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I meant to say that. Yeah, the whole workbook and the general plan and all the appendices are on the town's website.
And we're going through it page by page.
Yeah, we're going to go through the 388 pages one at a time tonight. So I hope you all had your nap. I know, David, you had your nap, right? All right, the state law requires that all the elements have to be correspondent. They can't contradict each other. So there are policies in the land use element and the circulation element and the housing element and the conservation element that all relate to the town center element. Land use says you preserve the existing character of the town, which is also in the town center element. Prepare design guidelines, allowing mixed use in the downtown area, implementing amenities and improvements to the downtown, and allowing residential on the second floor of commercial buildings by right, rather than requiring a conditional use permit. The circulation element includes policies about maintaining Sir Francis Drake as the major road through town, promoting bicycle safety, improving pedestrian accessibility and safety, and preserving the parkade for future use. The housing element policies talk about rezoning some of the areas from CH to CC would allow residential uses on the second floor by right, and also allows density bonuses for projects that are transit oriented. And the conservation element mentions a policy that has to do with air pollution. So all those four elements and the town center element are all kind of locked together. Thank you. Thank you. I've been working with this stuff so long, it's just like my name. Yeah. Yeah.
People in the back here all right?
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. All right. For those of you that really know me, I need my batteries changed from time to time because the good Lord took away some things. We mentioned design guidelines and development standards, and a couple of the elements mentioned those, and all of us will be working on those together, but the design guidelines are flexible rules. An example would be a landscape palette or a list of colors that designers could use. They're recommendations, they're not necessarily fixed things. Development standards, on the other hand, are things like height limits and setbacks. So the combination of those two will be developed and will be used to guide the plan. We've had, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of GPAC meetings. And GPAC is the General Plan Advisory Committee. And in the 40 or so years I've been in this business, and I've told them that, I worked with a lot of advisory committees, and the Fairfax people, the group here in this community, are by far the best one I've ever worked with. So you guys get a gold star. I mean, people that put in so much time, John and some of the others just have devoted a lot of their own personal time to this community, and you guys are lucky you have town leaders like these folks. But over the years that we put this together. The GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, used several techniques to find out what the town wanted, what the community wanted as far as their town center. We started out with conducting a survey at one of the festivals. We interviewed, or GPAC interviewed, the business owners and the property owners. We surveyed all the parking spaces in the downtown area. I saw Bruce came in the back, and he and his son and his dog and my son and myself and a couple of others measured and identified each one of the parking spaces. That probably needs an updating. I think you've seen that the weather and the sun has peeled the paint off of some of those parking spaces. We also did workshops, as Jim mentioned, and from time to time we had a technical expert come in and talk to GPAC about different things, including parking schemes and things like that. The town center plan includes the downtown core, and the maps on the wall by the door show you the extent of the limits of the town center area. And that was developed not by me. It was actually one of the council members at the time, Lou Tremaine, and I worked on it together. And he identified the basic area of the town center. So if you have any comments, you have Lou to blame. Well, some of the things that the GPAC discussed were linking the areas of downtown together. I mean, it goes from Fair Anselm at one end up to the library at the other end, and it includes where you're sitting tonight, plus the town hall and Perry Park and the pavilion. So it really encompasses all the major parts of active downtown area. Some of the recommendations that GPAC had come up with over the years was improving Center Boulevard from Pastore to the theater, and that was completed. That was one of the things that we talked about early on, and we found money and did the plans, and you've seen the result of landscaping and the lighting and the striping of the bicycle paths. All was a result of that. We also talked about widening and repairing the sidewalks, and that was a major issue for the business operators and the property owners in the downtown. Anybody that walks those sidewalks knows that some of them can be a little dangerous. The tree roots have heaved some of them up. They've cracked in a lot of areas. There's a combination of surfaces. You get asphalt and concrete in the same section of the street. So that was a big issue for the property owners. Creating a pedestrianized area of Bolinas from Broadway to Elsie Lane was another thing that we had talked about. And there was one example several months ago where we actually closed off that section of the street to see if it would work. So the town center policies say that we need to discuss that, it's not a plan, it's just a discussion item. So in the next couple of workshops, that will be something that you folks could work on. Those of you that really go through the town or commute through the town know that a lot of people will go through the Dominga neighborhood, cutting down Stewart or Sherman and using those streets to get away from the congestion on Broadway and Bolinas. And so trying to find a way to resolve that issue is something that the town has been working on with the neighborhood already, so it's not something that's new. Also, we talked about opening up the creeks. Right now, a lot of the creeks in town are in culverts, and some folks thought that, or voiced the opinion that opening those creeks would provide an amenity to the town. Some other cities and towns in Marin have done that. Mill Valley, where I live, has got a lot of their creeks are wide open, so people walk along the paths along the creeks and use them as nature classrooms for their children. We talked about creating safe pedestrian and bicycle routes. And there was a discussion of creating, defining elements along Sir Francis Drake to give it more of a welcoming aspect to it. We talked about arches over the street. We talked about all sorts of things. Bicycle staging area was something that came up quite frequently. As most of you know, this is a community that really respects the bicycle, the use of the bicycle. And we talked about creating a staging area someplace that would actually have places where people could store their bikes temporarily while they were going to restaurants in the town, or a place where they could have showers, just a place where they could get information about the trails that start here and go through the West Marin. And lastly, we talked about maintaining the parkade as a parking area, not anything else, but retaining it for possible future uses, including a terminal for a trolley system. So that's kind of a quick and dirty thing of how we got to where we are on the town center element. And Jim now will go through the stuff in a more detailed way, and feel free. I'm not in charge, but I would expect that if you smile and say nice things, you can probably.
So we're on the air here, so anybody has something to say, we're going to get you on the air.
So, real quick question. We're talking about the town center, which is great. But how about the people that are immediately outside, within quarter of a mile of the town center? Has any study been prepared on the impact of all these changes that would have to them, such as the conflict already between Broadway shutting down and the traffic?
Good question. We're here to talk about it, okay? But the study area is the area defined as a town center. But traffic hits us all, and yeah, sure. Sure. And with regards to questions, we'll take them along the way, okay? If we get too bogged down, we're going to have to keep moving. We want to leave a nice amount of time at the end for discussion. So don't think we're not going to be able to have discussion. We will. Mallory. No. Okay. But if you have something pressing and you want to stop along the way, please feel free.
You had stated that we will not be talking about the rezoning, proposed rezoning of some of the areas adjacent to the town center, and I would like to know when we will be discussing those, or why they are a part of this whole plan on the wall, or discussion on the wall, and yet we're not going to be discussing them here tonight.
So, good question. The town center is being impacted by the housing policies contained in the 2015 housing element. The 2015 housing element is the policy of the town. It was adopted last May. California calls for bringing zoning ordinances into compliance with housing elements. That's our mandate from state law. And we were also mandated to come up with the housing element. It's not the intent tonight to revisit the housing element policies or to revisit the implementation of the housing element vis-a-vis the zoning updates that are going on. I will tell you that the Planning Commission in this room over the last several months has been working on a draft ordinance to convert the highway commercial, which are like the bookends of town, either ends of the central commercial area, from highway commercial to central commercial, as Larry said, allowing housing on the second floor without a conditional use permit. So that's not the intent tonight. I know there was some emails going around talking about all the numbers and everything. That's not what we're here for tonight. So just so everyone understands.
So just a suggestion, if we get questions like the gentleman in the front, maybe we can write them down. So perhaps at the end, if there's discussion time and it's relevant to the town center, we can address those. I think Garrett was going to write those down. And then I think you missed one. And then I think the Planning Commission is taking up the ordinance for the Central Highway to Central Commercial in July, is that correct?
Actually, that's what I just mentioned. We've had 4 meetings on it, and the next scheduled meeting on it is July 21st, a formal meeting. It was publicly noticed for last Thursday, but it wasn't ready yet, so we continued it to a time certain. So the public notice went out for last week, and it will be on the docket on the Planning Commission's regular meeting, July 21st, unless there's any unforeseen delays. But at this point, that's what it's scheduled for.
The proposed changes to Tanalima Road specifically will be on that docket at that meeting?
Tanalima Road is not part of the CH to CC. Tanalima Road is one of 3 opportunity sites targeted for rezoning to what's called Planned Development District. It's outside.
Why is it on the wall here as part of this package if
Right.
that is something separate?
Tanalima touches the town center area. It's targeted for 22 cottage units of workforce housing. So it's relevant in my mind from the standpoint of it can help facilitate workers in the downtown area. Okay?
However, the change in that zoning, the change in that zoning, the proposed change in zoning from limited commercial to, I think it's something development, planned development district, thank you, will be discussed at this meeting in July.
No. Converting highway commercial to central commercial will be discussed at the Planning Commission on July 21st. Eventually, we'll be rezoning the 3 targeted opportunity sites for Planned Development District, 2 acres of the Christ Lutheran site, Tanalima, and School Street Plaza. But that's not what's happening on July 21st at the Planning Commission, and we're not here to discuss the housing policy that was adopted last May.
So that change in
Sorry.
that change in policy was adopted last May after all of that discussion that went down?
That's correct. Sorry. Norm, then Toby.
I just wanted to let you know that people are trying to catch it, streaming it on the web, and it isn't coming through.
Damien, did you hear that? This is the Oz behind here. Huh. Can you call Michael and see if we can get anything going?
Thanks, Jim. So sorry, just to clarify, building on that last gentleman's question. So in terms of the housing element, that is considered a done deal, and decisions around increased density or number of units, that's already been finished and decided. Is that right? Because my sense is from a lot of people in here is, I mean, it's great you have these workshops, and it's great that there's an opportunity for the public to get involved and weigh in on solutions or opportunities and so forth. But I'm guessing that a lot of people in here are more concerned about the bigger picture of development, you know, how much growth, traffic, housing. And so if you're saying that that discussion is completely closed, are you saying that this central town center element or discussion is going to be very constrained? We're basically working with what already has been decided in terms of number of units that are going to have to be allocated and all the rest of it?
Correct. Other comments? So we can move on. Mallory, you got to use this stuff.
Thank you. Did I hear you say that you will be putting off the parking plan until after everything else is done? Wait.
We're putting off the creation of a managed parking program, an attempt to create a managed parking program, until after the creation of the town center plan.
Why are you making parking an afterthought when it's a really big problem here, as is traffic?
Right. As I mentioned, it was the wisdom of the council to not get mired down on just parking because it could take up all of this effort and we would not get to other pieces that are important, like development standards and design guidelines. So it's a very important topic. We will be talking about particulars with regard to parking during the 3 workshops, though. So can we move on? Good, great. And I'm going to try and pick up the pace a little bit because we have a lot of territory to cover. So again, I'm going to go through slides that are the workbook that's on the town's website. It's on the wall here. And then we've added a couple at the end on next steps and also on a summary of problems and opportunities, which is where we really want to get your feedback. And that's what we're hoping to leave plenty of time at the end to discuss. So Larry mentioned the relevancy of this element to the other elements. There's a map that you can't see very well. There's an enlargement of the town center maps there. There's a small workbook size of the town center maps, but in essence, the town center area goes from the library in the west to the Ferencelm, Pastori on the east, and up to Town Hall, and that's the little 7-Eleven there. So the town center plan has basically 4 goals. Develop a vision for the town center area of Fairfax, maintain and enhance the historic character of the town center area, define and implement a plan for the town center area, and 4th, actively seek out and review all available funding sources that might be used to implement the town center element improvements program. I'm sorry about this typeface. It's it had a little problem importing it for our PowerPoint, but I'm just going to go through. It's actually, let's try it. Tony, maybe you can be my hand. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention all the different goals, and I'm going to pull out a couple of objectives, policies, or programs along the way. If you have any that you've seen on the wall or that you know of in looking at the workbook online, feel free to interrupt me and go to any specific policies. But, I'm sorry? I know, I'm sorry, this is, can you, let's see. Okay. Well, we worked through, I'm going to read out some of these as we go through. Again, now all these are on the wall, they're on the town website. So the first goal is to develop a vision for the town center of Fairfax. And the objective there being work together as a community to develop a vision for the town center area of Fairfax. That's what we're here to do tonight. That's what we're here for. I know, I'm not going to worry about it. Policy under that objective is new and or renewed development in the town center planning area shall preserve and enhance the village character and pedestrian scale of the downtown area. Large, highly visible parking lots characteristic of strip shopping centers are inconsistent with village character. Goal 2, maintain and enhance the historic character of the town center area. Objective, work with the community to maintain and enhance the historic character of the town center area. I think you have to go to the next slide, Tony. The slides get a little bit better along the way. We just discovered this glitch today, and I'm sorry. One program says, TC 2.1.2.1 says the height restrictions defined by the land use element and the downtown area of 28.5 feet and not more than 2 stories applies to the town center element. Goal 3, define and implement a town center plan. Again, that's why we're here. Policy under that says new and or renewed development in the town center planning area as defined in the town center plan when developed shall be consistent with the development standards and design guidelines. Program, planning staff shall prepare development standards and design guidelines for the town center plan. Program, the town shall review and approve development standards and design guidelines for the town center plan. Objective TC, keep going. We're at TC 3.2. Sorry. There we go, okay. Objective TC 3.2, create a strategic action plan for the town center, including an urban design program for the parkade and a parking improvements program. We'll come back to the parkade in a minute. Policy TC 3.2.1, bicycle and pedestrian-oriented development shall be encouraged in the town center planning area. Program TC 3.2.4.1, the town shall prepare a pedestrian plan for the downtown area. Again, I'm just pulling out what I think are the most salient points for you to think of as we work towards creating a plan. Okay, now here's no escaping it. This is what gives a lot of people heartburn. When I first arrived here on March 31st, 2009, the next day on April 1st, April Fool's Day, the town council had a meeting and a draft town center element was going up to the council. And that draft town center element said, thou shalt pedestrianize Bolinas between Elsie Bank and Broadway. And we said, oh, whoa, 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 wait a minute. This idea came out of a workshop that the General Plan Advisory Committee did a few years ago. We don't think the public is totally bought into this idea. And I took the initiative to recommend that we take it out of the body of the element and put it in the appendix and say, thou shalt study, okay? So that's what happened when the town center element got adopted. It did not adopt the policy of pedestrianized Bolinas, but it said, thou shalt consider it. So this is one of the most controversial issues for you all to grapple with. There are some people that participated in the General Plan Advisory Workshop with the public, and there were several breakout groups, I understand, from that event that came up with the idea of pedestrianizing Bolinas. And you know that happens now occasionally when the Streets for People event goes on, right? And the plan actually calls for testing it, which that event does test. When you close off that section of Bolinas Road between Elsie Bank by the park there and Broadway, when you close that off, it begs the question, where does the traffic go? And that is what leads to the idea of strengthening the connection when you come from the west and want to get to Sir Francis Drake on the Elsie Bank corridor. And during one of the cycles of Planning Commission review on the old Chevron gas station, the town worked hard to recapture the Bank Street right-of-way between Broadway and Sir Francis Drake. It's not the whole width of the Bank Street next to the bank, because that street has grown in size over time. It's a narrower right-of-way, but it's in the town's control now. The plan that was approved for the old gas station, which is actually going to be on the docket on Thursday night and for a slight review, it's not touching that right-of-way, so it is available to the town, although it is a confined, narrower strip than we would ideally like for two-way traffic. But the town did capture that in the application process of the owner of that property. So the Elsie Bank corridor, blowing through Bank Street to Sir Francis Drake, and what I would describe as the disposition, what's going to happen to Bolinas Road between Elsie and Bank is a big deal for you all to talk about. And we'll be coming back in the breakout sessions on August 6th to discuss it. And we'll see where you all land. Enough said at the moment on that. Yeah, so the policy says Bolinas Road should be evaluated as a pedestrian only area from Broadway to Elsie Lane. Programs TC 3.2.5.1 says if proven feasible, as a result of detailed analysis, the town shall develop a strategy for creating a pedestrian-only area from Broadway to Elsie Lane on Bolinas Road. The strategy should include a test program and means for successful rerouting of traffic to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Now again, this was written and approved in April 2012, and now here we are finally chewing on this. Another policy calls for any parking spaces removed as a result of streetscape-related improvements should be replaced in appropriate locations and lots in the surrounding vicinity. Program TC 3.2.6.2, the town shall prepare a no net loss parking plan for the downtown area, including on-street and off-street spaces and lots. Policy TC 3.2.1.3, the town shall consider purchasing or otherwise negotiating or ensuring the availability of a staging area for town events and the parking of large trucks. If you recall, before the Good Earth moved to the old Albertsons building at the Fair and Selm, there was all that surplus parking and the bicycle riders on the weekend and a lot of trucks for staging things would use all that empty space. That's gone now. Fair and Selm Plaza is up and running. The Good Earth has moved and successful. So even though you still see bicyclists parking there, they're not supposed to. And we really could use some staging area that we have not defined where at the moment. Go ahead, Mark. Actually, I got to pass the, yeah, thanks, John. You have to turn that one. That one's on if you want to use that one. Mark, you mind grabbing the, oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Shelley.
I just wanted, for the benefit of people watching at home and for anybody who has a smartphone on them and can't read the screen, if you go to the Town of Fairfax website, which, okay, well then, for anybody here or when you have this recorded, if you go to the Town of Fairfax, which is town-of-fairfax.org, on the lower left-hand corner of that website is the calendar agendas, and you'll see a link that says agenda and packet. If you click on that, you will go to a page that has workbook part 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're on workbook part 2. So if anybody wants to follow along on their own portable screens or at home, I just wanted to highlight that so people could do that.
Great. Thank you. That was Shelley Hamilton, who's been a member of the Planning Commission the entire time that I've been here, and I'm sad to say she has just tendered her resignation and will be stepping down, and we have an opening, therefore, on the Planning Commission. So, moving on, TC.
One more question.
Sure.
I know that we are planning these little committees that are going to go over, each different thing. That you have these small committees or something, or they're going to go over these things, and then maybe it'll get voted at the planning department or the town council, I would imagine. But I'm wondering whether something so centrally important to this town, like the whole design of downtown, shouldn't be on the ballot once you guys come up with some specific ideas, so that the thousands of people that live all around here can not only know what's happening, but have a part in the democratic decisions of these things.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, moving on, Tony, we're at TC 3.2.1.6. Consider creating a bicycle staging area, including structure for a bathroom, showers, and lockers, and possibly in partnership with local businesses. In my 7 years here, it's so frustrating. This town is like a ski resort for bicyclists. And they're here, they're coming through, and it seems like we ought to have a way for them to stay and enjoy themselves a little more while they're here. Okay, Tony, now, let's see, we're gonna move to the first map now. Okay, I'm sorry for that eye strain. The eye strain's over. Okay, so this map, again, it's on the wall, it's in the workbook, it's online, even if it's not streaming or not, the website's available, so you can get to the website and you look at this stuff. This is a map that came out of the General Plan Advisory Committee, what we call GPAC effort. If you look at the date, it's 05. Okay, this is 11 years ago, all right? This is not a done deal. It is part of the housing element that was adopted in 2012. And it's preferred concept. So this is not a done deal. This is what, at that time, and can I see, who's in the room was on the General Plan Advisory Committee? How many people in this room? Okay, you're all guilty. You're all guilty. You created the general plan. It's your plan, not me. It's not staff's fault. Hi, Mimi. So, let the record show that we have two other planning commissioners who showed up, Mimi and Bruce. So this is a concept, and you can see that on this one in the middle, it actually talks about down here three things I'm going to pull out for you. Reconfigure vehicle circulation, new intersection at Alsea Lane, Broadway, and Sir Francis Drake. So blowing the street through here we talked about, strengthening the Elsie Bank corridor. Create focal point at Broadway and Bolinas. Parkade as town center, wired for sound, for concert stage, or central fountain, Marin watershed waterfall with interpretive signage, permanent or rotating seasonal displays. Let me back up for a moment and go to the first one. Again, this is the controversial part. It says reconfigure vehicle circulation, new intersection at Elsie Bank, Sir Francis Drake, Bolinas as one-way outbound traffic or permanent pedestrian mall. Now again, this is a concept map. It was as part of the element as a concept. It was not adopted as a done deal. It's for you all over this workshop and the next two to figure out whether this makes sense or not. And then there's some other things that I encourage you to look at on here. It calls for, in the legend up here, it calls for new street trees, new pavements, enlarging sidewalks. It calls out enlarging some sidewalks, some places where it's very challenging, new street treatment and creek alignment and daylighting of creek. So the next slide, yes. Sorry, we got to get you on the air, Salem. We need someone. John, would you? Thank you. Even though it may not be live streaming right now, the recording will go up. So we just have to make sure everyone's voice
There's
is
a question
captured.
on this.
The black line that's to the north, is that the creek that looks like it's going through? Is that like totally
This?
defunct and underground? Yeah.
That's the creek.
So that's not really a functioning creek for a lot of that, correct?
Yeah. I'm not trying to say this is accurate. There's a culvert. I believe there is something going on. I think actually if you go down in Fratelicio's, you can go in the basement and you can look through into the old creek bed.
Yeah, it's, that dotted line is not that accurate, but there's approximately where the creek used to go.
By the way, Larry Kennings mentioned the daylighting of the creeks, and for the most part, I believe it was down here where the creek goes under Bolinas and then right under Sherman and then under that yellow house and the culvert jumps out. There was talk about that. And it is interesting, the work that Flood District 9 engineers have been doing, is talking about how culverts actually increase the chance of flooding because they restrict the natural bioactivity of the creek going into the ground, as well as they lessen the area for the water to be in, so it speeds it up. So culverts, in terms of flood management, are not a great thing. So as you know, my office sits right over the creek in a culvert, and you would never design that and build that today. So the next slide, I invite you to go back and look at these things.
One more question?
Yeah.
Jim, could you highlight with your pointer where the hazardous flood zone exists within that area? Because that whole area is in the hazardous flood zone.
Oh, that's a great map. I'll bring it next time. I'll bring it to the next workshop, okay? We have new maps from FEMA that show the flood plain. They also show a new thing called the floodway. And in the God forbid you're in the floodway and you want to do something with your property, because you have to make sure that you're not impeding the water. And in fact, 31 Broadway, when it came in for formalizing its informal space in the back, where Lydia's Kitchen used to have the tofu factory stuff, he had to hire an engineer to prove that didn't slow down the floodwater at all. And the arbor, the nice, beautiful wood arbor in front, had to be off the ground so that the waters weren't restricted. But thank you for mentioning that. I will bring the FEMA flood maps with me next time. And you all should become familiar with them. If you're in the flood zone, you need flood insurance, which is very expensive. If you're not in the flood zone, you should still get flood insurance because you could flood, and it's a lot cheaper when you're outside the zone. And also, we're required to hold you to the flood zone standards. So if you're remodeling a house, for example, over in Dominga, one guy came through, he got approval, and between approval at the Planning Commission and getting his building permit, FEMA came out with the flood maps, and he said, I'm, a foot and a half too low. What do I do? I said, we'll take you back through. Took him back through the Planning Commission, and they allowed him to raise, he had to raise another foot and a half, and so he's out of harm's way. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so the next slide. This was actually in the appendix. Not each element, but the town center element has a good body of narrative in the appendix of the general plan. And the general plan is available on the town's website. Don't get tricked into looking to that housing element because it's been updated. The new housing element is also on the town's website. I just haven't merged it into the original document. But this is a concept map. Again, it's not a done deal, but it talks about widening sidewalks, improving side crosswalks, decorative intersection at Broadway and Bolinas. It talks about make Bolinas Road between Elsie and Broadway more people-dominated and less auto-dominated, considered part-time or full-time northbound one-way traffic flow, consider bike lane on Bolinas, and we'll get to more of that in a minute. But again, this was in the appendix of the general plan, the town center appendix area. It was produced out of the work of the General Plan Advisory Committee. This was not top-down by staff. This was bottom-up by your people volunteering their time, and they met twice a month for years. So this is also a background map. It's not cast in stone, but it shows in this one, very interesting, it shows the elimination of the Klaus intersection and just making the Elsie Bank connection through between Broadway and Sir Francis Drake the main intersection. Not a done deal, just a concept map. It's for you all to think about. Do you have a quick, we got to get you on air. We got to get you on the air.
So one of the things, looking at this map, there's a couple of places where I think traffic really gets impeded on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, and depending on whether it's not in the morning or in the afternoon, east-west. So for instance, people making a left onto Azalea in the late afternoon or turning onto Sir Francis Drake from Azalea in the morning, we already have a turning lane, a left-hand turning lane just a bit west of that into the library. And then we have that street, which is rather narrow now, west of the lumberyard up until the library. So maybe making use of that. And the other issue that I want to raise is that the parkade itself, one of the reasons traffic backs up at that intersection is the entrance to the parkade is just east of the light. And then further east we have the bus stop, and then right past the bus stop, unfortunately, we have the crosswalk. So the combination of those three factors are things that add significantly to the flow of traffic. I realize we can't do anything to really reduce the volume, but we can certainly do things to improve the flow. And I would suggest that Azalea, and the other one, the last one would be the IGA market. And I certainly don't want to take money out of a local business's pocket, but making a turn in and out of that parking lot, east or west, really messes with the flow of traffic in the afternoon and in the morning. And I believe those areas are contiguous to this area of the downtown plan.
Thank you. Excellent points. And those are exactly the type of points we're hoping to get out of you tonight and to focus on and to come back in August, on Saturday, August 6th, and start to chew on. And that's where the rubber meets the road, actually, on August 6th, is to really start to flesh out some of these ideas. Other comment or question? Norma, did you, Sierra?
Has anybody ever actually done a study on making Broadway and Sir Francis Drake a one-way loop?
Broadway.
So that the traffic just circles around?
I don't believe so, and I think part of that is because Sir Francis Drake actually has some other standing with the state as a roadway that we can only mess with so much. But, you know, this is about ideas. This is the forum for ideas, and we will be kicking around in the breakout sessions on August 6th, lots of different ideas. So, you know, keep them coming, Salem. Okay, shall we move on? All right. So we're just now going to briefly visit the housing element, just because it's tangential to what we're doing, because it does call for infill housing. So if you go to the next slide, Tony. Thank you. Okay, the first goal, H2, and you know, maybe some of these I shouldn't have included, but I erred on the side of including it just to make sure we're covering the bases here, and I might have missed something too, so I apologize ahead. The first goal, H2, housing and programs for special needs populations, including seniors, single parents, families, as well as workforce housing and emergency homeless for the shelter. Policy H2.1.6, amend the zoning code to comply with Senate Bill 2, SB 2. Consistent with SB 2, the town will establish zoning designations for traditional and supportive housing and will define traditional and supportive housing in the zoning ordinance. This is on homeless housing. The town will establish procedures to encourage, facilitate the creation of emergency shelters and transitional supportive housing and link this housing to programs of the Department of Health and Human Services wherever possible. As part of the housing element update that was adopted in May of last year, the 2015 housing element update, we were required to put that policy in place, so we created what's called a public domain, and emergency shelters for the homeless are allowed on the public domain properties, which is like town hall, the parks, and also in the central commercial. We're required by law. Our quota, having said that, Larry, you taking off? No. Okay. I will do it. We're here to help, Larry. Okay. So So the town actually established where emergency shelters are allowed to go without a conditional use permit. The 2010 census designated 9 people, homeless individuals in Fairfax. So our quota, if we were to allow if we were to welcome in a emergency shelter for the homeless, would be at least 9 beds for homeless individuals. So we fulfilled that obligation. Goal H3, create transit-oriented housing in the town center area that is less dependent on automobile travel, thereby minimizing traffic impacts to the greatest extent possible while providing support for transit. Objective H3.1, develop at least 62 units of lower income housing within a convenient distance from transit access points where reduced automobile usage and parking requirements are possible. Program H3.1.1.1, amend CH zone, that's highway commercial when we say CH. Rezone all CH zones to CC, which is central commercial, which will allow housing on second floors without a conditional use permit instead of requiring conditional use permits. I'll get back to the 62 units in a moment. Program H3.1.2.3, I think it's the next page. Yeah. Identify and designate transit-oriented development sites. The town will identify TOD sites, that's transit-oriented development. Such opportunity sites were designated during the update of the town general plan and included in the land use and housing elements. If necessary, the zoning ordinance will be revised to accommodate the TOD sites. Basically, the infill sites I'll get to in a moment in the housing element do that. Goal H3, link housing and jobs in the community, including housing opportunities for Fairfax workers and public service employees, and that's why I included 10 Olema. Policy H4.1.1, link housing with jobs. The town council will revise the zoning ordinance to provide new housing opportunities at sites identified in the 2015 housing element. Goal H5, sustainable, affordable housing, well-designed, energy-efficient housing, affordable to and appropriate for a diverse population at compatible scales. Next slide, please. So briefly, these are what I call plates. They're pages in the updated housing element that was, again, adopted by town council in May of last year. The one on the left is a summary map showing the town's entire strategy for meeting, yes, the state mandated regional housing needs allocation for Fairfax, which were, after we took advantage of what's already zoned for housing, left us a balance of 124 units. That much of that email tonight was correct, by the way. So it basically is divided very simply. Upstream, what I call up the canyon at Christ Lutheran Church, we modeled 40 units of senior housing. And I'm thrilled to tell you we are expecting an application from the nonprofit developer out of Berkeley in the next couple of weeks. And they are going to ask for a density bonus, the maximum, because they have planned all 40 units at extremely low income for seniors. So they're going to come in with the full 35%. That means an extra 14 units on top of the 40. Okay, one of those 14 units would be for management. If you wouldn't mind holding your question for a moment. I'd like to get through this and then come back for any questions on the housing element, if you don't mind. We did have a workshop in this room on the Christ Lutheran Church, on the 10 Olema, as well as at another session on School Street Plaza over here. And the nonprofit developer's architect did roll out 2 what-ifs. One did show 4 floors. That is gone, I'm happy to say. They had another plan that showed a portion of the building 3 floors, and I have not seen the application yet. From what I understand, there is a very minimum section in the middle that still has 3 floors, but they are coming in for the full 54 units, which is maximizing the density bonus. This would be 53 units for very low-income seniors. This is the best happening thing in Marin County at the moment, as I understand it, and we have a silver tsunami coming. Coming downstream, we have the tent. So that's the Christ Lutheran Church. The site itself is 20 acres, but what is being done is just 2 acres at the very bottom where the old church and the school used to be. That's the intervention. So they're coming in with a lot split in their application for those 2 acres down that have already been disturbed. Next is the 10 Olema, which again just touches the downtown area, and that was modeled for 22 units, hopefully cottages, small scale, of workforce housing. The deal with the state, that 40 and that 22, which is 62, half of our 124, that was our quota for low income, okay? And the state actually said if, by zoning a minimum density of 20 units an acre, you don't even have to make them affordable. You meet your affordability range on all 62, okay? So we've backloaded the 2 acres for the 40 units on 2 acres, that's 20 units an acre, okay, not counting the density bonus. And the 10 Lima, that's 22 units of workforce housing. I'm happy to say the church site would have given us our quota for the 40 and now 13 more senior housing without them being affordable. But the church is doing the right thing, the nonprofit developer is doing the right thing, and they're all going to be for low-income seniors, okay? Jane, if you don't mind holding your comment for a minute till we get through this, because I know there's going to be several comments on the housing element. So that's 62 I call upstream, all right? So let's talk about the 62 downstream that are in the town center defined border. Next slide, please. So this is School Street Plaza. Each of these plates have a shaded area, and that is the land that's being targeted, okay? School Street Plaza is targeted for being rezoned to Planned Development District. It's a very special part of the zoning ordinance that was created for mostly the sort of condo developments upstream. It has a very laborious 3-step process, and we're actually changing the language in the Planned Development District zone for these 3 targeted opportunity sites, the church, Tenalima, and School Street Plaza. And you will notice that this is being, if it was in the focus, you would notice that it's being targeted for 9 units, up to 9 units, or at least 9 units, and a maximum of 10. And that came out of the workshop because the owner showed up in this room and rolled out plans for 58 units, and everybody went, so we said at least 9 and a maximum of 10. So there'd be no conspiracy theorists. I'm sure the owner would love to put as much on there as possible, but at this point, what we've targeted in the housing element that's within the town center area for this town center study area is 9 units, and they don't have to be affordable. They can be moderate. Okay, moving on. This is the Fairfax Market over here, okay? What we call the West Side Commercial, going to the old Good Earth, and we modeled 17 units that would be in the new, this is the new CC zone at the west end. And one of the things that's so striking about the West Side Commercial, and in a moment you'll see the Fair and Selm slide, is highway commercial is just what it sounds. It was about the car. It was about big monolithic buildings and parking lagoons. It was about the automobiles, not about pedestrianism. It's not about a village character. So one of the beauties that came out of the land use subcommittee in drafting the general plan was this idea, let's heal these scars, these bookends of town. Let's get them back as they develop, not one fell swoop, but as applications come in, let's make them go back to the historic fine grain, buildings facing the street, pedestrian amenities, parking behind, so the car isn't king. So that's the strategy that came through in the housing element. When we updated the housing element, we just massaged the numbers. This basic approach was what was adopted in April 2012. It's just the numbers we massaged as the state's mandate got higher for the number of units. Next slide, please. And oh, by the way, can you go back for a minute, Tony? We had a workshop, and the owner of Fairfax Market did come in. This is the market right there, you can see right there. And he did come in with a little what if of a ground floor retail with upstairs housing, and it was a workshop to show the public before he formally applied. He got good feedback. He got some constructive feedback about more streetscape amenities and whatnot, and we hope he will come in the near future to put what we call a liner building at the street and with pedestrian amenities so that it fills in the town at that end. Next slide, please. So this is the big bad Fair and Selm. Again, monolithic buildings, parking lagoons, and the upstairs of these 2 buildings, which by the way, if you were to build them today, could not go past about halfway back because of the creek. They're built over the creek. You cannot do that today. But upstairs, they have huge open areas. If you recall, in the little plaza between them, you have the offices upstairs, right? And all behind those offices are huge areas that would make fantastic artist lofts. So when we were modeling 22 units in the Fair and Selv site, we thought, wow, what a great spot to just use that empty space for infill housing. And then we also thought about between the old Albertsons, where the Good Earth is now, and the Java Hut, a liner building, not unlike up by Fairfax Market, that would address the street and have retail below and housing above. That begs the question. You're going to lose some parking if you put the building in. And we'll talk about that on August 6th at the workshop, okay? So over here is the East Side commercial. And we modeled 14 units in the East Side commercial. Now, if you notice, well, actually you can't see it on this drawing, but the town center area ends at Pastore, okay? This isn't part of the town center area, but it's a really interesting little enclave. It's the old historic fine-grained nature that the town center still has, right? It's got a lot of old homes that got converted to commercial space in the go-go days of commercial, rents going up and everything. Now we have a glut of commercial. So one of the policies that the Planning Commission is chewing on right now in the conversion of highway commercial to central commercial, which that is part of the bookend. Highway commercial is this and this, believe it or not. This beast and this is all zoned highway commercial. One of the things they're looking at that applies mostly to here is allowing homes that have maintained their authenticity to go back to being homes. And there's two prime examples of that. Right across from Town Hall in Bolinas, there's where the birthing center used to be, and there's where Sustainable Fairfax used to be, old homes. They were being used for commercial space, and within the last 2 years, through the Planning Commission, they flipped back to homes. So there's that little nuance. Also, there's a big parking deficit in this area, and maybe in our workshop in August, we can talk about not only where would those lost parking spaces go here, but if we could magically figure out more parking, how we could sort of create pedestrian amenities so that when you come from the parking somewhere magically in here, you would walk to this area. There's currently no sidewalk along Sir Francis Drake to get there. Sort of a no man's land. If you don't mind holding your comments on housing element until I get to the end.
Thank you. I see for the lower left that you include parcel number 002, 123, 1 and 2. And although that image includes also parcel 002131110, I just want to make sure that we're not going by the image, we are going by the parcel number, because that overlays a great deal of mine.
Sorry, can you, again, I'm going to ask everyone to hold their comments on the housing element till the end. So, APN numbers are a moving target. The county can change APN numbers at any time, okay? It's one of the reasons why in the zoning ordinance, where it says that if there's a discrepancy between the zoning map and the tables that exist currently in the zoning sections of the zoning ordinance, that the tables will prevail. Again, we can't control the APN numbers, and in fact, in certain zone districts of your town code, APNs show up in 2 tables. So in the update, in the CH to CC exercise we're going through right now, we're eliminating the APN table. So I can't guarantee the authenticity of these APNs. Michael, if you have any information about any incorrectness, we appreciate any help you could do on these things. We were asked to add the APNs so that, again, Michael, please hold your comments till we're done on just the housing element so that everyone gets a fair shot at it. I'm sorry, Michael, please just... I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things with your property relative to this site that we can noodle as we go forward. So please, I don't want to get sidetracked at this point. Thank you. So moving on. Actually, okay, so we're past housing it. Go ahead, Michael. Let it go. You want to give him the mic?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that have questions.
Yeah.
I was just asking to confirm that the image overlay that you provided is not an accurate representation, because the image as it overlays, the property property boundary follows the creek, which is actually under both of those buildings and north of your tree drip line, as you see in your image. And I just want to make sure that you're not encroaching on additional parcel.
This is for illustrative purposes. It is targeting the Fair and Selm property, wherever that property line might be in reality. Promise, that's it? Nothing on the housing element?
I just think that for places like Tanolima, we need to put the plan in place before we rezone. And allowing 22 units on 1.2 acres with no sidewalks in front, if you're doing cottage style, I don't know how you're going to get it. The creek sides one part of that property. It also is built over the creek. So you're going to have the same setback problem. I don't know how you're planning on getting 22 units in. Don't approve the zoning before you have the plan, because developers will take it to the hilt and ruin the neighborhood.
Thank you for your comment. Again, the housing.
This is just really quick. The thing that's really unsettling to me is to say 56 units, 22 units. Simultaneously, you need to tell us, will there be parking for 22 cars, for 50 cars? Because that's a big part of it. You can't just say we're going to have so many units and not at the same time tell us how many parking spaces.
Thanks for your comment, Diane. I think you may have got here a little after a comment I made, which is we're not here to just debate the housing element that was adopted by the town council last May, the housing element update. So part of this exercise today and going forward the next two workshops is to discuss issues that are important. Parking is an important issue. I'm not sure you were here when we said that the town council decided to put off creating a managed parking plan till after the town center plan is created, because they didn't want this to devolve into just that. Having said, excuse me, Diane, excuse me. Let me address your first comment before you respond, okay?
Yeah.
So, right now, we have planning commission meetings that are working on the rezoning of the highway commercial to central commercial. And part of that exercise is to discuss the parking requirements for new housing on the upstairs in the old CH, which will be now the CC, as well as the old CC.
I understand
and
that.
The planning commission in this room on July 21st will be holding a formal public workshop on the rezoning of CH to CC. Yes.
I completely understand that, and that's what I thought you're going to talk about the parking later. But if you've already figured out there's going to be this at Olema, this at the Lutheran Church, at the same time, whoever decided that, I thought you would have decided the parking for those defined places already. I'm not talking about the units on top of the buildings in downtown Fairfax. I'm talking about those three specific places you mentioned. I can't understand how you could, because if you're building 22 units on Olema, if you know how you're going to fit in those units, you would also know how many parking spaces will get on that property. So do you have an answer to my question? How many parking spaces on 10 Olema, for example? How many parking spaces with the 56 units? Do you know how they're going to space it?
At this point, I can tell you that I have not seen the plan for the church, but as it's my understanding that it will be fully parked per our current requirements in the zoning ordinance for parking spaces for the senior units. When we did the site capacity studies on 10 Olema, the town sponsored an architect to do 3 site capacity studies. There were public workshops, and each of those 3 site capacity studies showed parking for each of the units. Tonight, however, Diane, we're not here to debate the church.
Oh, I don't want
10
to
Olema.
debate it. It's a simple question. So are
Yeah.
there 22 parking
But what you're discussing, sorry.
Okay, so maybe as clarification before we get into it. So Jim's whole goal was just to provide background. So he provided a lot more background on the housing element. But really to answer your questions are, when the senior project comes in, they're going to have to submit an actual plan. The plan's going to have to show how it meets the parking. There will be a process for that. For Tanalima, there's actually no plan that's been submitted. When they modeled it, they came up with some different scenarios. However, that also, whenever that plan were be actually submitted, they'd have to show how they meet parking standards for the site. But that being said, I think you're spending too much time on the housing element, and you need to move forward. But if it helps, I'll put your comments on the sheet so to make sure that we don't forget about that.
Oh, thank you, Garrett. I actually thought that, to follow up on your comment, I think there's a misconception that Tanalima has been designed and people are ready to move in and there's no parking there. There's no plans. There are no designs. It's only kind of what the site would accommodate. It'll accommodate about 22 units. When people come in, exactly what our manager said, when an application comes in, they will need to show where is the housing, where is the parking. And the requirement is that you need one parking space for a one-bedroom unit and 2 parking spaces for a 2-bedroom unit. So that is what they would have to park. But right now, there's no plan, and that's why they can't tell you how many spaces and who's going to park them where.
Thank you, and that is Norma Fragoso, who is our Vice Chair of the Planning Commission.
Okay,
who
and
would
I
be
have
the
a number of
body
people
reviewing the
lined
plan.
up for questions. I think you're, well, hang on, let me bring you the microphone because.
Just want to clarify, you made the statement that Jim's plan or the town's plan, they're none of the town's plans. These are independent developers who are coming and making proposals and plans. They can't answer questions about plans that haven't been submitted. So it is perfectly transparent because it's in the code, as was just spoken by the last speaker. So it's not, there's no illusion here. It's very, very clear.
Thank you.
I just want to bring everybody up to date with what's happening here. Wait a second. Everybody's concern here is we do not want to emulate Corte Madera. That's why you're getting these questions.
Okay, okay, now just hang on a second, okay. This, I can understand people's concern, and yeah, nobody wants what happened there to happen to this community. And this community has strong opinions, and believe me, we're not going to let that happen here. So
okay,
I'd like to calm everybody down about that.
So
we have a strong community involvement here. And we had a number of people who also wanted to ask questions. So
Okay.
I'm sorry it's holding you up,
That's
Jim,
okay, it's okay. It's okay.
but we've got to do a public process here, and I'll get to you after the others.
Breathe. Nothing's been, it's like it's been said, nothing has been approved. Plans haven't been put in. Whatever gets submitted, it still has to go through us in the town. And just like the Chevron, it's like, you know, builders have to be somewhat crazy and have to be fairly bulletproof to want to deal with us to begin with, folks. I just have a couple of questions, Jim, fine points. For 22 Manor, you call it workforce housing. I'm wondering what is workforce housing, and isn't workforce just anybody? And I'm curious, what is affordable housing? And I'd also like you to define, you've kind of talked about, you know, the building bonus and this bonus and that bonus, and I think I kind of understand it to be that if the builders come in with a proposal that pretty much fits us and as well as has a lot of bells and whistles that we appreciate, such as affordable housing, whatever the affordable housing benchmarks are, that they get build out bonuses for meeting those requirements, but I'm not entirely sure. I wanted to say something about School Street, and that is, I think School Street does have a really valuable place in our community. I think there's a lot of businesses that are in there, and it's basically kind of a low-rent commercial to a degree, and I know it's private property, but I wonder if there's any way that we can have in town code anything for any kind of business incubators. You talk about a glut of commercial space, but I don't see a glut of affordable space for the artists and everybody else. And I just wanted to make one comment about the creek going back is, look at the bridge that is on Pacheco at Broadway right next to the parking lot for the Fairfax Theater. There's an old bridge there, but there's not a creek there, which begs the question, where did the water go? And how does how we build and how we live, how does that change where the water goes? And water tends to go where water goes, and it's going to come back to where it wants to go no matter where we try and force it. So we should think about that with all the building we do.
Okay.
I was just going to put another plug in for resources on the website. If you do want to know details of building standards and development standards for the CH district, for the CC district, for the planned development district, our town code is online that you can access through the website. And for example, the planned development district is chapter 17.112. And within that code, if you want to know specifics around heights, setbacks, parking, there's a section on general standards and requirements that includes things like provisions around parking. So there is that kind of detailed information if you would like to go in and look at that detailed information around what's included. It very clearly describes this very onerous 3 or 4 part approval process where the town is going to get to weigh in once there is something specific. So if you want to know more details, the town code is available online.
Thanks, Shelley. Okay, we've got, I know, I've got another one.
So I have a question about, I know that some of the developments are by right, and I think that means that they're facilitated in terms of they don't have to go through the environmental impact review process, and I'm wondering how new development may impact the flooding situation. Does that mean that new impermeable surfaces may come into play and there won't be a review, or does the town have, I mean, is that a danger?
Are we storing up these questions?
Yeah, we're capturing the questions, and flood is always taken consideration. The issue of by right or without a conditional permit doesn't mean that the application doesn't have to be submitted for design review, and that's why it's important to create development standards and design guidelines, okay, so that a developer comes in and they have direction on how to build, and that the town doesn't want higher than 28.5 feet or 2 floors within that 28.5 feet. But in terms of environmental, we did an analysis on the build out of the housing element under CEQA. We did an addendum in the update last year. We're doing a CEQA review on the rezoning now. So all those things get taken into consideration. There's, every month in this town, there's a process that goes on that involves you. There are public notices sent out for the town council meetings when it involves you and a decision is going to be made. And there are public notices sent out to properties within 300 feet of anybody of a project coming in. That public notice is sent out. The postings for the for the town council meetings and the planning commissions are posted online, at the library, at the bulletin board. And these are important things to keep an eye on. And we have a mailing list. You can go to the town's website and you can be asked to be emailed the agendas for these things. That's really important to keep track of. But these are things, when you're updating a zoning ordinance, this town, the people that I serve on the planning commission, that serve you, they don't do this for an income. They do it volunteer, and they are working diligently to draft an ordinance amendment. And when they get done, they'll pass a resolution saying to the town council, we recommend you adopt this. And then the town council will hold a public meeting. It'll be noticed. You should come and you should speak. And if you're not happy, Diane, about things, you should come and be involved and speak about it when the laws are made. Zoning ordinances in the state of California are under police powers. The laws that pertain to the town, a lot happen in this room. There's still the federal and the state mandates, I know. But a lot of your town code is you. You get to make it. And right now, the general plan, which is a blueprint for the town moving forward, has an discretionary element that your neighbors decided, and some of the people in this room decided to include, and in that town center element that we just went through painstakingly, says, let's create a town center plan. Let's all get our fingerprints on the knife and come in with something we can live with. If you got issues that bother you, like parking, even though we're not going to do a managed parking plan, we can flush out, some of the issues of where, when, how. And then we will come back and work on a managed parking plan. But this is important stuff, and this is a bottom-up process. Any other questions before we move on, or comments?
Yeah, I see several other questions, and I could make a comment as a member of the GPAC who worked on a lot of this general plan. We didn't work on any of the housing element. That was a lot state-driven. But a lot of it came from the public outreach process. There were hundreds of people that commented and made suggestions, and frankly, that's where the pedestrian section of Bolinas Road came from, was the public. And so basically, it reflects the comments that we've had, and it should continue to reflect that, and that's why this public outreach is here. Jane, did you still have a?
It's very quick. I don't know if this is the right time to put this in, but you were talking about the senior housing and the workforce housing. Is there any control that could be people that live here? Or my understanding is it's open to anybody in the entire Bay Area, and there's a huge waiting list, and the people who place the people are in Berkeley. They're not from Fairfax. So do we have any input as far as saying that these places can be for Fairfax workers or Fairfax seniors, or is it just up for, should I talk about this some other time? Thank you.
Briefly, funding sources have requirements, and for a project like the senior housing, they are getting funding sources that do not allow the town's discretion on who comes in there. That's the formal answer. Informally, there are ways to try and help people that are here, but it depends on the service provider. I don't know the particulars on Bennett House, for example, but it'd be interesting to know what goes on there. But that's drifting back, Jane, into the housing discussion. We're here to create a town center plan. And can we get somebody else who hasn't asked a question yet? Or
This is quick
Sorry.
because I know about Bennett House, because I know people who live there, and most of them are not from Fairfax. They're from all over the country and different states also.
Kiki. John Kiki's got something.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd just like to take a 30,000-foot view for a second, and with my fellow Fairfaxians and our staff and so many of our electeds and commission members and committee members. What we're doing here, and I think the goal, is to put our dreams together and our vision together about what we want our town to be in the near term, midterm, and long term. And a lot of work has been done in the documents that we've seen already, but it's not complete, and it really does require input from all of us who live here, who work here, who love this town, to help to fill it in. It's like this is a coloring book where we just have the outlines, and we have the opportunity to work together collaboratively and create something that is the realization of a dream for all of us and our families and our kids. So I'd really like us to kind of take that high level and say, wow, we have almost a blank slate. What can we do that's going to be the best possible thing for the most number of people in our town?
Thank you. Should we move on?
Come on. There is a way that we could include or be more inclusive of our local seniors as in our community. If we have our own redevelopment agency or BID, which taxes ourselves so the funding is local, we could then direct mandates that would say that we are going to first offer our housing for those people from our community. So like people that have paid taxes in our community for the last 20 years and find themselves aging and or disabled. So there are options.
Yeah, there's questions about redevelopment too. But.
So Governor Brown eliminated redevelopment agencies. There is no ability to do that any longer. No, there is no ability to do that any longer.
Really quick, Shelley, and then we got to move on.
appreciate your answer to the by right question. Really quickly, by right simply means without conditional use permit. That's all. And that's all it means, is that you don't need a conditional use permit. You still have all of your environmental reviews, all of your standards, all of your parking requirements, all of the other review is all in place. The only thing that you don't have when you see the word by right is a conditional use permit. That's it. And often there's this conception that by right means the code book is thrown out the door and you can do whatever you want. It simply means you don't need a conditional use permit, and that's it.
Thank you. So, Jim?
Okay, now should we move on? All right, great. Phew. Sorry. Okay, land use element. Tony, thank you. Keep going. Okay, real briefly, I'm going to blow through here. Preserve scenic and natural resources, policy LU, existing public easements will be utilized to develop a system of pathways as a potential recreation, circulation, and public safety resource. We'll come back to that in a minute. John's an expert on the wonderful old paths that are in your old subdivision of the hills here. It's an independent path system from the road system. It's wonderful. And many of those old easements, if not all, maybe 90% of them still exist and are waiting to be brought back and are also good emergency exits too, because a lot of times you won't be able to drive down the hill. Okay, goal LU5, manage future growth while preserving the area's natural resources. Policy LU 511, new and renewed development shall occur primarily as infill development. Y'all got that? Infill development. The way we save the open space is we build where the infrastructure already is. We don't spread out anymore. We don't sprawl. That's what the county's trying to do, is preserve its open space as Fairfax has done, and accommodate modest growth. And yes, some of it's mandated by the state. And you all, the town's elected and appointed people, came up with an infill strategy in your wonderful housing element that is Fairfax way, not, thou shalt be higher than 2 floors or 30 units per acre or whatever. Fairfax came up with a wonderful plan. Okay, goal LU7, preserve community and neighborhood character. Everybody hear that? Unfortunately, Diane has left. She's not a part of the process at the moment, which is frustrating, because that's what this is about, preserve community character. It's not about blowing the place with a stack and pack and Corte Madera. It's about preserving the community, village, nature of Fairfax. That's what this exercise is about. There's no sinister conspiracy here to gentrify Fairfax, which, by the way, is happening anyway. Goal LU8, preserve community diversity through affordable housing opportunities primarily along transit corridors. Not everybody wants a car. I know that's hard for people to understand. Not everyone drives a car at certain times of their life. LU9, preserve and restore local historic buildings, features, and sites. Policy LU 914, structures designated as historic, which are noteworthy in terms of age, individual style, notable architect or builder on the site of a historic event associated with a famous person, industry, or activity. This part of local history shall be preserved, and long-established character of the town center should be enhanced. The overall physical character of the town center should be protected from damage and substantial change. How more clear can it be? And I would add, even though we're talking about Tenolima, that's outside the center area, but touches it right at the needle, it's one of the oldest homes in Fairfax. It's beautiful. It's there. It ain't going anywhere. The 3 site capacity studies that we did with the architect were what ifs. They weren't plans. They were just testing to see if you could accommodate that. They all kept the old Saez house there. And that house was occupied at one time by the granddaughter of the Spanish soldier that was given the land here by the King of Spain. Think about that. That house is still there. She lived in that house. And her grandfather was given this whole valley by the King of Spain. Amazing.
The debate about whether it's his to give.
John?
Oh, sorry.
Former Planning Commissioner Pam Meigs has a statement.
So having started with this and worked on it for 10 years, I just saw the word should. The overall physical character of the town center should. You know what? It should say shall. It's a little wiggly there, so sorry. But I've done so much of this. Anyway.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the circulation, Tony? All right, I'm going to blow through these because we still have a little bit important stuff to focus on. Circulation element, the relevant portions. Goal C1, maintain Sir Francis Drake as a functional regional artery. Policy under that, promote pedestrian and bicycle circulation to ensure that automobile convenience does not compromise bicycle and pedestrian safety and convenience. And policy C18, ensure amenities to support public transit. Goal C2, promote the safe use of collector streets by automobiles, cyclists, and pedestrians. And under that, policy C25, comply with state and federal regulations related to universal accessibility in Americans with Disability, which the acronym for that is ADA, Americans with Disability Act. Also important for mothers with strollers. Goal C5, consider pedestrian and bicycle facilities as an integral part of a complete circulation network that provide affordable, healthful, and ecological means of transportation. And under that goal, policy C58, bicycle and pedestrian-oriented development should be encouraged in the town center planning area. Policy C59, create safe, direct pedestrian crossings across the parkade and between the parkade and surrounding shops and services, and we'll be getting to that in just a moment. There is a plan for that. Goal C9, promote less reliance on single occupancy vehicles. Under that, policy C61, make land use decisions that encourage walking, bicycling, and public transit use, particularly ensuring existing and future bus service. Lastly, goal C8, improve circulation and safety in the downtown area. Policy C81, promote better utilization of LC Bank Street to connect Bolinas Road to Broadway and Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Lastly, the conservation element, goal 2, air quality. Support development approaches and usage measures near the town center to reduce individual motorized transportation requirements. And with that, we'll move on, unless someone has anything on those.
I'm sorry, Jim, quick one on the last section where you're talking about the character of Fairfax. So in terms of preserving the character, it seems like there's good language about the physical character, but when I think of character of the town, a lot of it is what happens within those spaces, especially retail and so forth. And we've seen a trend of places like Casa Mañana and Sleeping Lady being closed down, an increase in boutiques and shopping that may serve tourists but not so much residents, and the character and feel of town. Is there anything that can be done in the planning process or anything we're discussing here that gets at what kinds of businesses are in those physical spaces?
Oh, wow. Well, Toby, if you're a glutton for punishment, you can go back and look at the workshops the Planning Commission's been holding, actually not formal public hearings yet, but at both their regular meetings on a regular item and also at special meetings, they've been working on this ordinance to convert CH to CC, okay? And part of that exercise was to eliminate the listing every specific type of use, either as without a conditional use permit, by right, if you will, or with a conditional use permit, and getting into categories. So that work that they've done will come to a head in this room on July 21st at the public hearing, where they will be deciding whether to send it up to the council for formal adoption. You should avail yourself to that draft. You can email me and I'll make sure you get the most recent working copy. And this is very, it's a very challenging thing when areas like this go through the demographic changes that we know from the last 2 census Fairfax has been going through. We have the housing prices continue to skyrocket throughout the county and here. We have a demographic change between the 2000 census and the 2010 census, where we lost a lot of blue collar workers and we got a lot of white collar workers, and you can see it. And by the way, traffic patterns increase with gentrification also, and there's a lot of gentrification going on in the West County that comes through the Sir Francis Drake corridor. So, you should avail yourself to these public discussions, particularly the one on July 21st. Some people think that some of the more, you've articulated some of the ways that uses can also change the fabric of a town. So that's the best answer I can give you at this point.
Okay, and while I walk the microphone over here, I've got one here and then 2, 3. Public service announcement. There's a Dodge Caravan, 5P 28192. It's blocking another car. So if that's your car, can you move it?
Thanks, John. I'm kind of left with a feeling that history is driving us in the wrong direction sometimes. We have a historical feature in this town that says people drive their cars to the center of town and park them. We do have the Conservation 2.11 up there that talks about air quality. But we don't explicitly say, let's move to reduce, eliminate private car use in center of town. And also that we have had a whole panoply of new technologies that have come forward. There's no place in this distribution or conveyance process that talks about, the whole Uber Lyft phenomena, the fact that we don't need to bring our cars to town, we don't need to sacrifice, we don't need to sanctify parking spaces. I find this whole notion that the parking place has become the 11th commandment, thou shalt not destroy a parking place. And yet all around the world, everybody who's done a quality of survey of life in center of town, the first thing they've done is destroyed parking places. They've taken them out because they just encourage people to come in and park. So in some ways, there's these new technologies, there's these new opportunities, and yet we're trying to lay it upon an old tapestry. And yet we need to create the new avenues, pardon the pun, so that we can move more freely without the use of the private vehicle. So,
Thank you for that, and I will just venture a response to that. When we do have the opportunity to talk about managed parking, which means possibly paid parking, if you will, not long after I got here, we had a very interesting fellow from UCLA, he's sort of the parking guru. His name is Dr. Donald Shoup. He wrote a book called The High Price of Free Parking. And I have that presentation on tape, including the back and forth with Gary Graham over parking meters on Bolinas. And Dr. Shoup brought up something very interesting about proper metering. His whole thing, which is being implemented in San Francisco right now, actually, talks about right pricing the curb parking so that if you have 15% surplus, you don't have a problem. You don't need the parking meters. But once you get to less than 15% surplus, his hypothesis, and this being proven in different cities, is that you should right price the curb so there's always one space open. And then you should direct people to where there's cheaper parking. So if someone wants to go sit on their computer for 2 hours at at Fairfax Inn, they're going to go, or employees at taking up prime parking spaces, employee parking program. And one of the magic things about making parking available curbside, according to Dr. Shoup, is you don't get the cruising around looking for the empty space at prime time. So it cuts down on greenhouse gases by having a designated place where people can go. And if they want that prime spot, they may have to pay, but they're gonna get it. Because you're going to have, they do dynamic pricing now in San Francisco, and they got a phone app that'll tell you where the space is empty, and you go right to it. And then you can actually update the money in the meter from your phone while you're going somewhere. But we won't go towards smart parking spaces in this conversation right now either. Anyway, okay, anybody else on?
Yeah, I just, well, you kind of just put a new question in my head. You just put a new question in my head, which is, I get the sense that perhaps paid parking is on the horizon, and since it's so controversial, it may be why we're not going to speak about it until after the plan. Just kind of sounds like that. So I'm just curious about that. But also, I wonder if more than just Tony could get access to a working draft of the public hearing document for July 21st Planning Commission presentation, because I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to kind of get a good sense about what is in that.
So you can see on the town's website right now, go to the planning, the government pull-down tab.
For the latest one that you said that you would send him the latest draft?
Yes, you can see what was done in the last meeting, and you will get on the website on the homepage, usually the Friday before the Planning Commission meeting, you will get the packet, the agenda in the packet, and that will include the updated thing. As a courtesy, because Tony and I work on the wall property together on keeping people abreast, I thought I'd just cut the chase for him. But it's there for everybody. You can go look at it, and you can watch the videos on how it got to that point in its evolution.
Thank you.
And by the way, you're absolutely correct about the managed parking. It is exactly right. It is very controversial. It is as controversial, perhaps more, than the idea of pedestrianizing Bolinas Road. It will divide the town, as I think the idea pedestrianizing Bolinas Road has the potential of doing if in fact well, we'll see how it comes down. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. We've had issues with the mono lane neighborhood because of the theater parking bleeding in there. And when it was proposed that we do a neighborhood parking strategy, we realized, well, if you confine the bubble there, the bubble's going to go into another neighborhood. So you have to think comprehensively. So it's a big deal. It's going to be a big deal. There's going to be a lot of bloodletting when we create a managed parking plan, if we ever get one.
So I have a couple of questions, or actually like a couple of questions and a point. As far as the parking around Mono, once our neighbor was no longer there, who had 8 or 12 cars parked in the area, I think things eased up a bit. It may be premature, but we probably will not be here for August 6th. There are a lot of people who were in the audience who are who live on Dominga. And part of the reason that we're here this evening is that we're not real thrilled about seeing Dominga turn into Bolinas Road. And I think that there's a good chance of that happening if Bolinas gets closed down in that section to be a pedestrian-only thoroughfare.
Stand by for the problems and opportunities, Mark.
Okay, I didn't know if that was under circulation and I was going to miss my chance, or if I was going to be premature.
Thank you. I think we got to move on, though, if that's okay. I've been talking too much also. Okay? So let's go to the parkade. So this happened before the actual adoption of the general plan. It was a grant that former Councilman and Mayor Larry Bragman arranged. I think Larry's here tonight. That we got. It's called the Non-Motorized Transportation Pilot Program, NTTP. Funded this study, and it looked at the parkade area. It was called the Parkade Area Circulation Study. It was actually accepted and adopted by the Town Council in August of 2010. Again, you can go to the web page archives. You can download the whole report. I've just taken snippets out of here. The cover page, the background, introduction and background. If you go to the next slide, Tony. Unfortunately, this graphic was part of the document, a PDF. I couldn't pull it out and make it better, but that little circle you're seeing up there, that is the parkade, okay? And it talks, that's the parkade. Entrance here, exit on, ironically, exit on the Broadway. And it calls for sidewalk improvements around the parkade. If you recall, the sidewalk doesn't go all the way around the parkade, okay? It calls for bicycle circulation improvements on Broadway. And actually, there's this below. This is a cut through. That's showing Broadway. This is the parkade, and this is Sir Francis Drake. And what this study showed was you can have the sidewalk, you can have street parking, you can have a Class 2 bike lane, which is a striped bike lane, not just Charos saying this is a bike lane, but a striped bike lane. And then you have 3 aisles of 11-foot traffic, another Class 2 bike lane, and parking. It shows that can fit. Bicycle parking in the parkade, improved signage. It also calls for not only new ADA crosswalks across Broadway, it calls for crosswalks through the parkade that currently don't exist, and new crosswalks, which actually there's a new one in, if you recall, with the light, thanks to Garrett, right now in Sir Francis Drake. And it also calls for streetscape elements, landscape elements, transit enhancements. That little transit shed is hurting, it needs help big time. ADA access with the stairways and the ramps. Intersection interventions, I mentioned the mid-block crosswalks, stairwell upgrades, parking, and the whole thing was projected at approximately a little over $400,000. And we actually went and applied for grants and were awarded a grant through the One Bay Area grant process. Originally, it's now changed funding sources a little bit. We have $300,000 with waiting for us to implement this project. We will put in $100,000 matching funds. There are no hard drawings yet. There's just this improvements plan, so to speak, in this fashion. It's in your workbook. And we are bringing it up again now in this town center plan process because this is the nucleus of the town center. We have money ready to go to improve the sidewalks, the crosswalks, these other amenities I mentioned. So it's going to be very important when we come back and we get into the work to thoroughly vet this and make sure you're all happy, because this is ready to go. This is the second part of tonight's exercise. One was revisiting the policies. This is a plan that's on the table and it's funded. This is a big deal. This is a great deal. Okay, and moving on, lastly, before we get to the final maps and then problems and opportunities, one more map, one more, Tony. And gosh, if you slide that forward a little bit, the whole thing, I think we can see it. Okay, Morgan's here. Morgan's sitting in the third row here. He's the local architect, had been on the planning commission for a while. He owns, you know, the little pot shop on Bolinas and the little art boutique shop. He owns those those buildings in front, and then the house behind where he used to live. And being a resident of town and owning property on Bolinas, he offered up this idea. I'm sorry, this is a little bit faint, but it's basically keeping the width of the sidewalk the same and adding bulb outs with trees. Not everyone likes bulb outs. Not everyone likes trees on historic roads like this. It improved crosswalks. Okay, and we will bring better plans when we come back on August 6th, so you guys in whatever group is going to noodle Bolinas, the disposition of Bolinas, you'll have access to this drawing. There's actually some engineering drawings that engineering firm took it a little further. And along with the other concept maps I showed you earlier, you will be noodling that. And then lastly, that gets us to the maps. So let's just briefly go through these, and then we've got some time left for more questions and answers. So this is an aerial, and it shows the town center area outline. There's the library, little strip center, which, by the way, has a couple little housing units up in the back. I'm not sure if they're all permitted or not. There's the little mound that actually some geology classes come to look at because it shows some interesting strata going on. There's the parking lot we talked about with the building that's going to be coming in for ground floor retail with upstairs housing without a conditional use permit, but meeting design standards that hopefully you all will be creating. There's the Fairfax Market, there's the Fairfax Lumber, and in the middle here, going right down through town, you see the old rail easement. Okay, there's the rail, there's School Street Plaza, there's the Bank of America, there's the ball field, there's, blur your eyes a little bit and just look at the fabric of the heart of town, the CC. Look at that, right there. That's the heart. There's the old fabric of town. And then look at the bookends. So your development standards and design guidelines hopefully will show how this can happen as this builds out over time. Next slide, please. So this is, again, showing the defined town center area. You'll notice the parcels actually shown around it, but the parcels are erased in the town center area. And what I find just fascinating as someone trained in urban design is how the old easement just defines this town. Look at that, right through it. This was originally a transit village. In fact, it was an industrial rail that, to make more money on the weekends, started taking passengers up here to picnic and get away from the fog in San Francisco. And then someone subdivided it. Someone made a bar, and the rest is history. Here we are. Oh, and the 1906 earthquake, that has something to do with it also. But look at this also. Look at this old rail easement, and look how it bifurcates the town. This right here doesn't exist. This is Merlin, okay, and it stops at Broadway. That's an old easement that right next to the hamburger place that doesn't exist, right? But you have these two. There's the library. There's the one down from the library. Here is, it doesn't even show Klaus. This is an old subdivision map. There's Klaus, the actual one that exists. Here's Bank Street that now we at least own the portion that's the public. And then here's one blowing through, right through Bolinas. Wouldn't that be interesting? This one exists. So you got one, you got two that's not shown here, and you got 3 and 4. That's the only way to get across in the entire town. It just blows my mind in the town center area. It's very interesting. You've also got something else here going on. You've got these little old footpaths that John told me actually still exist, although one I think you said is blocked somewhat. Yeah. And then all this down here, these are paper streets around Perry Park in the town. This is Bank Street coming up. Sorry, my battery is getting low, I think, on the pointer. There's Bank Street coming up, and it doesn't go up like that. That's almost to the ball field. It actually curves, this old pedestrian even, it curves just like that, and then goes like that. But that one right there, that little sucker, that little pedestrian thing actually exists, and they take their trash out the back door that way on Mono Alley. And then also, ignore this, these are paper streets for a minute. Look at how simple the block pattern is. And, you know, the blocks get bigger as you move out from the town center area. So not only is the town bifurcated by this old rail easement, and therein lies one of the big challenges for the town, but you have, you have these mega blocks down here. You know, getting from here around to there is a long way to go. So maybe there needs to be some intervention to make this more friendly. There's no sidewalks here to service this area, and if there was somehow magic more parking in here, that might be interesting. And then also, one of the challenges that the parkade plan actually hopes to help alleviate is that, and came out of the General Plan Advisory Committee's work that culminated in the actual adoption of the general plan, was that the businesses on the north side of Sir Francis Drake are cut off from the action on the south side of Broadway because of the parkade. So by improving the sidewalks and the crosswalks, hopefully that linkage will be strengthened. And then I would argue also there was a bit of a disconnect between the Fair and Selm and the town center area, and that may or may not have been improved as much as possible from the Center Street improvements. We'll get to that in a minute. And then also, once this improves here by the Fairfax Market, improving the linkage to the center of town will be important. And then again, parking, even though we're not going to come up with a managed parking plan in this exercise, I think we can talk about where there might be opportunities for more parking as you do the breakout sessions and you know, in the parking circulation breakout table. It might be interesting, because I have a feeling that while this is a line of demarcation from the south and north side, southwest and south side, and the north side, it may be a resource still to actually organize ourselves around that center, because you have this main thoroughfare, and then as you heard, the town center element calls for making Broadway more local serving, keeping it local serving. So how do you do that from a design standpoint? There's some really interesting challenges that we're about to embark on in the next 2 workshops that I look forward to. Next slide, please. So this is a little hard to see in the resolution, I'm sorry. This was like 2 different data files, and even the printer couldn't get this to go right. But in your booklet, it came out well. And this is a topo map. These are 5-foot lines, topo lines. You know what I'm saying? It's measuring in 5-foot increments, and these little dark things are actually the readings of the height elevation. And look at how this end of town is defined by as you come in, by the land masses. It really is a physical gateway. And yes, David, we hopefully will work on your gateway treatment also next to the Good Earth there. And also up at the northwest end of town. As you come in, there's this wonderful little spot right here where the views up to Mount Tam just take off. Just gorgeous. And there's great views here as you come up the mound and looking off this way. So how you take advantage of those things, how you coordinate them with streetscape improvements, how you manage the massing of buildings, all comes into play. And we're headed to dealing with all that, which is going to be, I hope for you, fun. It's fun for me. And then lastly, let's see, I think there's one more. That's just showing the different land uses. And we did blend, even though we haven't done it yet, we blended all the CC, the CH and the CC together. And these colors, unfortunately, are mushing together. That's actually a different color than the central commercial. That's showing the different land uses, and this is a legend. Again, it's in the workbook, it's online. Next slide, please. And this is what's called a figure ground. It's basically showing the footprints of the buildings on the lots. And again, blur your eyes from this to this. Very interesting. So, next slide. Issues. This is where we want your feedback, and we're still doing okay. We've got we're going to shoot for 9:15. We've got 25 minutes. So briefly, again, we took a stab at this based on what's happened, what was in the element, what we've heard along the way, and we'd like to just get your temperature read. Did we get something wrong? Did we miss something? So chime in after I go through this list. Sidewalk widening and repair. That's not always possible. Bolinas is, if you're going to keep what's on there now, really hard to widen the sidewalk. Doesn't mean you can't. It means you have to make other choices. If you get rid of some of the parking and you have no net loss of parking, where are you going to put the parking? It's not my problem. It's yours. You had that policy. Streets without sidewalks, as we talked about that. Reconstruction of the parkade, we talked about that. We have a plan on the table with money ready to go. Very exciting. Traffic circulation at Sir Francis Drake, Klaus Drive, and Broadway intersection. We talked about blowing Bank Street through. Big discussion needs to happen. Big decisions have to be made or proposed and then made. Auto circulation and parking not well organized in area. Linkage between businesses on north side of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard and those on the south side of Broadway. I mentioned that. Bolinas Road should be more pedestrian friendly. How? Lack of class 2 bike lanes. We showed how the parkade plan is actually showing that you can fit a class 2 on Broadway, keep the lanes and the parking. Safe routes for bicycles and pedestrians. I should have added, and I'll add now, that in the appendix of the general plan, that's also available on the town's website, part of the general plan incorporated the town's bike and pedestrian plan. It's going through an update right now. John, Vice Mayor, and Renee, the Mayor, are part of the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They're working with Transportation Authority of Marin and a group called Alta Design, and they are working on updating that. We will inform you about what is being recommended as we go into the new 2 workshops, and there will be a presentation in September of the draft update, correct?
Correct, and I can give you a 30-second synopsis. Basically, the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee this time around is heavily weighted towards pedestrians, and which is a good thing, because in past bicycle plans, bicycle pedestrian plans, it had a real comprehensive plan put forward for bicycle routes and things like that. And that still exists, but what has been added to it is basically an X. One starts from what we termed the Broadway Narrows, which starts at the library and then gets really narrow, that everybody's probably familiar with. Goes along there, past Fairfax Lumber, and to the downtown Fairfax. It didn't include around the parkade because we're going to deal with that in this set of workshops. And then the other axis of the X basically goes along Bolinas through by Bolinas Park, up the by the Pavilion parking lot, past Bank of America, crossing where there's where the old Chevron station was, and continuing across the crosswalk by M&G's over to Bell Market. So that's the extent of it. And there's some more details in it than that, but that's a broad view of what that plan is extending to.
Thank you. And we will, keep our hands on what's going on with that. So if I can move on, we really got to keep blowing through here. Lack of bike staging and parking, lack of available parking at certain times of the week, e.g. weekends and during special events, impacts of traffic and parking on adjacent residential neighborhoods. Commercial loading zones, and you're going to be at that table, right? You're going to be at that table, okay. Overall parking for downtown area. We can still discuss parking. We're just not going to try and tackle the behemoth, okay? Now, opportunities. And often, next slide, please. I realize that problems, the flip side of problems are opportunities, and the flip side of opportunities are problems. So here's some echoing here on what we just saw with the issues. Gateway treatments at the west and east ends of town center study area on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Huge opportunity. We're being shamed by the Good Earth sign right now. Reconstruction of the parkade for AD access, including sidewalks around the parkade. As you saw, we've come a long way towards that goal. We need you to fine tune it so we can make working drawings and do it. Improve linkage, we talked about that through the parkade. Creation of Class 2, we talked about that. It's doable in the Parkade plan. Make Bolinas Road more pedestrian friendly and available for community events. Widen sidewalks. Do you want to widen sidewalks? Do you want to add landscaping and/or a bike lane? Big, big, big things to noodle. Add sidewalks to improve connectivity. We're still missing some sidewalks in the town center area, and we do have a complete streets policy in the town, by the way. Revisit Center Boulevard streetscape improvement, such as the bulb out design, landscaping, and loss of street parking. Anybody ever gone over those bulb outs coming in and out of one of the curb cuts? Anyway, better use of Elsie Lane and Bank Street arterial connection to Broadway and Sir Francis Drake. Improve traffic circulation at Sir Francis Drake Klaus Broadway intersection, better use of the hardscape area on both sides of the Elsie Lane and Bank Street corridor, including the parking area along Mono and the Pavilion. You know, that corridor is just all hardscape. It could be thought out and better utilized for more parking, especially if you ended up losing a little parking on Bolinas Road. And lastly, next year, develop a managed parking plan. Okay, so before we come back to the problems and opportunities, I just want to end my little dog and pony show and then open it up to you for the time we have left, okay? So just briefly, Tony, next slide, please. What's next? Okay, mark your calendars. August 6th, 9 to 3 o'clock. We'll have a nice lunch break. We'll have a coffee break. We're going to, the middle community workshop, this is where the rubber meets the road. Sorry for the metaphor. And after we review the list that comes out of this meeting, we'll do these breakout groups to start to come up with more defined strategies for improving the town center area and creating a town center plan. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, after the second workshop, August 6th, the third workshop, October 1st, then staff and consultants gather around your direction and craft a draft plan. And we think that draft plan will probably include things we don't know now, but at least development standards and design guidelines, which we need. And there's more to that. I don't want to take the time right now, but we need that. We really do need that, because when the housing's allowed on the second floor without a conditional use permit, we need that to show people how it's done. Multimodal circulation improvement plan. That's pedestrians are transportation. Bikes are transportation. Strollers are transportation. Buses. There was a recent study done, Cross Marin Transit study, that looked at bus improvements and potential trolley. Expensive, possible. Landscaping, capital improvements plan. That means curbs, sidewalks, gutters, bulb outs if they were there, parking spaces, whatever. Landscape improvements. In my experience as an urban designer and professional planner, one of the most controversial subjects to get people to agree on is what kind of street trees. It is torturous to try to get people to agree. And we do have something facing us with the Parkade plan, because it calls for improving the sidewalks along Sir Francis Drake, and those liquid ambers are a nightmare for public works. The roots come up. So we don't want to pull trees out. How do we put in sidewalks and keep the liquid ambers? Do we keep the liquid ambers? A landscape plan, not only for the Parkade, but for other areas of town. And some places you don't want landscape to interfere with visuals. Anyway, okay. And finally, an implementation strategy. So if we could go back, Tony, to the issues and opportunities slides, and I'm done with my presentation. We got a lot of good comments along the way. I thank you all so much for being here tonight. And the time we have left, let's just wrap up with some further comments, questions, or corrections.
Thank you. So I think there's one issue and opportunity, it's kind of both, that you mentioned earlier, but I don't see it reflected on here, that I would hope you would add. The issue that it's not because of this, but necessarily, but the issue of flooding and the opportunity of daylighting, which you mentioned earlier, the creek, and how that could enhance both flood control as well as the enjoyment of the landscape of that. Thank you.
I wanted to say that another option for Bolinas Road would be to, am I being heard? Yeah? Would be to take out the parking on one side, and that would give enough room to broaden the sidewalks on both sides, because I can see, like, now that the sidewalk is wider, to go to the Good Earth is totally nice. It's really a nice walk to go to the Good Earth. You can even cross people, and you don't have to squish over and talk, and it's just really nice. So I think that broad sidewalk is a really nice thing, but I'm not sure that it needs to be totally pedestrians. I think just like broadening the sidewalks is a little bit less radical approach, so that cars can still go through, but there is broad sidewalks, and just taking out one side of parking would probably be enough to get that accomplished. So.
And we'll be getting into that at the next workshop.
Yeah, but the LC, that doesn't exclude like improving the LC so that there's access to, that would be really interesting to. All right.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is an issue or an opportunity or both, but there's a lot of talk about bicycles and pedestrians and so forth and so on, and very little I haven't heard about the traffic, people who actually have to get out of Fairfax and go like to San Francisco or San Rafael or all over every place. Some people have to do it every single day, 2 times a day, and they're dying. And it's not doing anything for our air quality. We need to find a way, if that could please go on the issues for efficient movement of traffic and commuters who still exist and will exist for a long time, in addition to making it all pretty for everybody. Get us in and out.
So solving the challenge of the Ross Valley Corridor is beyond the scope of this exercise, but let me tell you, if you go to the Transportation Authority Marin website, this transit study I told you, it was just completed, it's online, it's huge. There's an executive summary, which is huge, but it looked at improving bus service with 15-minute headways, not dedicated headways, which is still going to be a problem. You're going to be sitting in traffic on the bus, but there'll be more frequent buses. And it did test trolleys, which are a very expensive alternative and has to compete with the cars also. But there's some interesting ways that they've figured that using the old right-of-way on Center and part of the old, 2nd Street through San Rafael. You should avail yourself to that study. But that's a multi-jurisdictional effort. There ain't nothing we can do in Fairfax to get you to San Francisco.
But you can get me in and out of Fairfax. And if you take out Bolinas and make people who live up in Cascade take a circuitous route or on Dominga, that's one issue I think needs to be addressed. Thank you.
As I said, that's a big one.
So I have one that I think we need to include in issues, and that is ingress and egress out of town, egress particularly in a wildfire. I think my personal perspective is Bolinas Road is going to be very important as well as any other ways out. So I think we really need to focus on public safety issues when we look at Bolinas Road.
Hi, I would just like to, I'm from Dominga, and you know we have problems on Dominga. There are a number of us here tonight, which include speeding and traffic, and also being used whenever there's a big event. Our street becomes the main thoroughfare. So with that, I would agree with Barbara Kohler. But my issue is, when you're discussing the downtown center, I think Dominga, the neighborhood, should be included when you're talking about impacts of the downtown center, so that the boundary isn't just on Bolinas Road, because we are impacted by everything that goes on downtown. Thank you.
Right. And Susan, I don't know if you noticed, but the third to last bullet is impacts of traffic and parking on adjacent residential neighborhoods. That's right. That's probably one of the most impacted, I suppose, yeah. And Susan, thank you for being here tonight. Let the record show Susan was on the town council that adopted the general plan.
So I'm intrigued with the circulation that you're proposing that actually opens up Bank Street all the way to Sir Francis Drake.
And can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I'm not proposing this.
Well,
Okay.
you, the town.
No, the town itself, through these documents, is saying, think about it.
Well, I would give you
Thank-
credit for it if you
thank-
wanted it.
Wendy, I don't want credit for that one, thank you.
No, we actually, the intersection of Klaus is a total nightmare. And I think, creating that circulation actually might improve the egress out of town. Because right now you have to slog your way through Bolinas, which is no fun at all. I have a suggestion for Slominga. You don't mind if I use your Slominga term? That street should be traffic calmed. It is sort of a traffic calm street, just the way it's laid out, but whenever you hit a straightaway, everybody goes fast. So there are a number of different techniques, including speed humps, as a possibility. I think that if that street was designed in such a way that would absolutely discourage people from trying to use it to get out of town, then it would solve a lot of the problems and open up the opportunities for what we could do on Bolinas.
Thank you.
Most of us are lazy. We really are. It's like we hop in our cars. No, we hop in our cars, we turn the keys, we basically it's like we reduce everything to money. We go ahead and we trade our time for money. Most of us do jobs that we really don't necessarily really like that much. We drive to the city. It's about money. It's like we talk about getting in our cars and how inconvenient it is. I mean, I look around this room, it's like, really, honestly, where were we born? Where did we grow up? How long have we lived here? I see one other person in this room that I've known for over 40 years from high school. Some of us have been here 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. At this point, what entitles us to be here? It's mostly income and money, unless we're lucky enough to have been here and bought a house 40 years ago or 50 years ago or 30 years ago or make $250,000 a year. But other than that, we're lazy. We don't want to get on our bicycles. We don't want to walk. If I get in a car, I hate it. I literally hate it. I can be to San Rafael and back to my house in Fairfax in less time than it takes me in a car. And I'll probably live longer unless I got hit and run over by somebody in a car. Sometimes it's pretty inconvenient. I mean, I'm not trying to say that I'm any better than anybody else by using a bicycle or using a car or whatever. I'm just saying we're lazy. And I've suggested this 20 years ago, rip up the parkade and put in community gardens. It's like we build for money. We don't build for the land. We build for us. We don't think about any other life form. We don't think about the water. We don't think about the air. We don't think about the soil. And look around this planet. What are we getting? What are we leaving for anything's children, you know? We're lazy. Look at politics. Look at Republicans. Look at Democrats. Look at all of us. We're fighting over stuff. Why?
Sierra, we got to keep
money's
moving.
important? I know. Anyway, sorry. That's just kind of where I'm at.
Hi. I've lived here for 32 years and raised 4 kids here. We are walkers and bikers. And I think I want to thank everybody who's here, who's been volunteering, been paid to do this work. I know there's a lot ahead, but I think it's really great to get started somewhere. And I just want to say, I think we have an opportunity because there's such an influx of tourist bikers that come from Silicon Valley and everywhere, and they want to enjoy what we enjoy and what we have here. And I would just like to suggest that somewhere on the agenda, there be a question of, is there possibility for out-of-town cars to be parked so that they don't float into all our residential communities, because it's really hard on the weekends to walk in our neighborhoods without feeling like we have to dodge the parked cars, especially with children and grandchildren. It's really dangerous. And sometimes the bikers just buzz through our neighborhoods in such dangerous ways that if you're a slow walker like I am, you really are taking your life in your hands. So I'd like to suggest that we look at an opportunity for a staging area for bicycles, which is there, but also a possibility of the tourist bikers that come to town, and maybe they could pay for a permit, and when they get the permit, they get the rules of you must stop at stop signs, you must be aware of children and grandchildren and strollers, and those of us who live here, and not park on our streets, but park in this designated area. And I'm not suggesting building more parking, but I know that St. Rita's parking lot is often completely empty on the weekends. And perhaps we can contract with Ken, Father Ken, and I know he needs some money, so I think there's a lot of ways to use what we have here more creatively.
Hey, can I just, I'm not going to slow us down, but I can't resist but saying that some of the bikers that illegally park now at Fair and Selm, they go on their bike, their trip, then they come back, they load their bike up, and they drive downtown and then try to find another parking space. It's very important to come up with a park once strategy where people can park and then do many things without getting back in their car, as opposed to a shopping center so big that you have to go in your car to get to one end of the shopping center to the other, which is kind of how the town works right now. Thank you.
Hi. Back to the traffic situation. I think we should put as much importance on cars as we do bikes and pedestrians here, because they all count. And I think some of the problem, I remember when we had a right-hand turn off-center across from the movie theater by the gas station. Now we put an unnecessary water device called the flowers and the plants. We don't need that. We need the right-hand turn, because people now are backed up to the good earth. They didn't used to be backed up when we had the right-hand turn by that gas station. And when we had parking in front of the post office in that whole row without the second row of plants, which most of the time look like a mess or dying, and every so often they get maintained. We don't need a second row of plants for the water reason, for the parking situation, and I know the bike coalition is really strong, but we need to also have a strong coalition for people who have to drive and don't want to wait unnecessarily because we've not really beautified, but we thought we were going to do that. So I want to see those parking spaces back. I want to see the second row of plants in front of the trees and the plants that are already there taken away, so we can have more flow and less traffic.
I'd just like to take a second and go back to the vision thing. And a lot of the conversation that we've had tonight is how to make what we've got now better. And I'd like us to also, as we have this opportunity to do this forward thinking and planning, and I'd be interested in your comments about a time horizon, how long we think this stage of development is going to take to build, and also how long it's going to last. And I'd like to remind myself, as well as all of us here, that the way the world is going, we all need to be doing less of what we're talking about facilitating doing more of. And that is going places in our cars and finding places to put them for the 90% of the time that we're not going somewhere. And I'd really like to see us planning ahead for the concept of if we build it, they will come, and that means let's build a transit center. Let's build a place where shuttles can come down from the hills so that we don't have to be driving our cars to get to either downtown or to get to some other larger form of transportation, a bus that's going to take us to San Rafael or to the city, or a shuttle that's going to take us to the ferry. I would really like to see a more far-reaching plan that looks ahead 50 years and not 10 years and says, we want our town to be for people, and we would like the steel and metal and rubber and greenhouse gases not to be part of our lives. Thank you.
I think about 2 hours ago, I think I heard something mentioned about maybe there ought to be some consideration of developing showers for the bikers who come into town on their $2,000 bikes and so on. Something seemed curious to me that we could even be thinking of that. Someone could think about that, and yet we don't seem to be allowed to prioritize our own elderly residents and have them have priority for low-cost elderly housing. Something seems really bizarre in the values where people would even think of that before this other issue. So I just wanted to mention that.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I live on Dominga Avenue. And I'd just like to add to the list of issues, if we're still doing that, cut-through traffic on side streets. That's an issue that's kind of on the flip side of the opportunity of creating a more pedestrian-friendly downtown. So I recognize that having a pedestrian-friendly downtown is very, very enticing, but the impact will be cars will be going around that area where they can't drive, and they'll be driving down Dominga, Napa, and Mono, and all the other streets that are surrounding. And on Domingo right now, we have an issue with, I mean, there is cut-through traffic. The volume, in my opinion, I don't speak for everyone on my street, is okay. The speed is really the issue. They just fly by. And my concern about creating a pedestrian area on Bolinas is that the car volume will increase. And we might put in some traffic calming, as Wendy suggested, but then the volume would just be, the numbers going by would just be so much higher. So we might calm them, which would be nice, but then we would just see car after car after car, I fear. So if this idea does go forward, I would just ask some sort of very, very strong traffic solution to the surrounding streets. I've seen things in Berkeley where they've, you know, in College Avenue, you used to take the side street to avoid College Avenue, and they've literally just blocked it. And I know we can't do that here because Dominga is used for our fire protection for the fire engines to get through if Bolinas was ever blocked. But I would just ask some sort of very creative thinking about not allowing people to cut through on Dominga if this does happen. So thank you.
I think Bruce has.
Okay. There are more questions here? You got one?
A lot of time and energy has gone into this and a lot of thought, which I appreciate. But to build on what Sierra said, who's going to pay for it? Because sometimes it does come down to being about the money. So I've heard 100,000, 300,000 seems a lot more expensive. Is it a bond type thing, or how is it proposed that we come up with money for this kind of a project?
Well, first of all, we need a plan to know what it is, and one of the deliverables was an implementation strategy. So we have to come up with our plan, and then we have to look at funding sources, and that's along the way that will be thought through.
And there are funding sources from other higher up in the government.
So listening to a lot of the comments tonight, and speaking as one of the people who was involved in GPAC, along with John and a number of other people in town at that time, I'd really like to describe this, the idea that's on this map here, not as closing Bolinas Road, because that's not what you would do first, and it's not what you would even need to do. It really is opening the LC Bank corridor. That's really what the idea is. So I think about it this way, that where pedestrians, bicyclists, and people who just are standing on the street and talking, where we all hang out is on Bolinas Road and around that intersection at the end of Bolinas Road. That's where everybody is, but that also is where all the cars have taken over. If you look at old pictures in Fairfax, people are standing in the middle of that street having conversations, and, well, we can't do that anymore because the cars have taken it over. So if we can open up that other route by cutting through where the gas station, at the end of where the gas station, Fairfax Gas, used to be, and actually make that a better route for cars, then it solves a lot of the problems that we're hearing tonight. One of them being that the cars that want to go through the Dominga neighborhood, if they have a better route to go, a faster route to go, then they wouldn't go through Dominga neighborhood. So the idea isn't to choke down traffic on Bolinas. The idea would be to open up the LC bank corridor and allow traffic to go through there more easily. Then once you did that, that would obviously be the first thing you did. That would be the number one step, would be to open that up. Then once that was done, then we get to decide what we want to do with Bolinas. We could leave it exactly as it is, be two-way traffic, or we could make it one-way, or we could do whatever we wanted to. One of the advantages, one of the reasons that when we actually had a traffic consultant look at this idea, the idea came up in this room in public workshops, and people literally, someone mentioned, I think Kiki mentioned, wouldn't it be nice if we all just thought of this as having pages on which we could color? Well, we actually did that. We had gigantic maps, and everybody had coloring materials, and we sat in 6 groups in the room, and we colored. So that's actually where this came from. 2 of the groups in the room came up with exactly this plan at the same moment. The thought of possibly Bolinas Road becoming one way, going that direction, that thought came from the notion that if you did that, it would still give us plenty of egress through town, and we have a pretty well-defined, at least at that time when the economy was roaring, we had a pretty well-defined morning rush hour going that way, and not so well-defined an evening rush hour. So it was more important to keep the egress from town smooth. And the other reason was that you actually, if you don't have to have a left turn coming from Broadway onto Bolinas, you actually save a lane there, and that allows a bike lane to go all the way through. That's a sort of an unexpected benefit that I think should be mentioned, that if you can save that left turn lane onto Broadway, you've got an entire extra lane. That's kind of the choke point on Broadway, on Center. So there are just a number of different, it kind of all fits together, and it was surprising to us on the committee how when this came out, we started out with something very similar to this, a list of issues, a list of sort of the things that people in our various surveys had said. Basically, when we surveyed people, everybody said, we love Fairfax, and then they thought for a minute and they said, but there's this one thing. And so our list was sort of the things that people said, well, these are the issues that we see in town. And that was the list that we were all addressing in these workshops, two weekend workshops that we did in this room. And that's where this idea came from, was to sort of address those issues. And just one more really quick thing as far as Dominga. I personally really would love to see traffic calming on Dominga. It really is just a matter, as I understand it, of negotiating with the fire people because they don't want to have speed bumps. But I would love to have speed bumps on Dominga. I think it would be a good way to do it. So combination of opening up LC Bank and slowing down traffic on Dominga, I think would solve the problem of the cut-throughs on Dominga. Thanks.
Are there more people with questions or things to add? Yes, I can see one.
My name's Patty Bruszewski. I own Sherman's General Store on Bolinas. And for starters, I was once at a meeting in 2007 where we went through all of the same questions, and then it seemed like this whole idea was buried. We were asked, the business owners were interviewed somewhere around 2007. No one's asked us any input since, at least me and Bob from SNN. They haven't interviewed him. So I think, you know, all the businesses that are going to be directly related are not a part of it. And they're just ignoring us and our input. And it's going to affect our businesses. We rely on the people coming in and out of Fairfax, both directions. If it goes one way, Sherman's General Store won't get the traffic from the locals that live on the other side of Dominga, the other side of Sir Francis Drake. It'll just be too much of a hassle to do this big circle. They'll go onward to another town to get their card, or there's so many people in retail on Bolinas Road that's really against it, and it should be you guys need to interview everyone all over again, because that was like 9 years ago. There's a lot of new owners now that haven't even been approached.
Okay, thank you. Are there, looking around for more questions or things to add? Okay. I'd love to get a chance, kind of as a citizen. One of the things that hasn't come up here, if you think way back, there used to be a four-way stop at Klaus and Sir Francis Drake. And now, there's a traffic light there, which is great for people going through on Drake. And I'm not saying let's put a four-way stop there. But if you think about what happens right now, when that light turns green, pedestrians, if they know what they're doing, they don't cross the street anywhere in the area because everybody has to run the stop signs to make that traffic light, which is kind of dangerous and pretty dysfunctional. And one of the things that there may not be enough space for there, but I'd like to get it in the hopper just so we can look at it, is if you had a small traffic circle, like a roundabout kind of thing, it would slowly move all the time, slow enough so that, you could have crosswalks adjacent to it and get across as a pedestrian, but also the traffic would keep on moving, and it would function at the same time as our stop signs so that stop signs could lead to it, and it would clear out downtown, because one of the reasons why people cut through the neighborhoods is to avoid the fact that it's a parking lot with, all of Broadway is just waiting to get through that parking lot, and everybody runs the stop sign to go through the light when it's there. So that's one thing. The other thing, somebody put up a temporary sculpture down there, and it's a plywood or something cut out of a fountain that's there. And, yes, we're supposed to save water and stuff, but the water gets recycled in a fountain. And I think that that's a nice feature, too. So.
Something just occurred to me I want to bring up. The two most contentious issues, apparently, that you identified is the possibility that there might be parking meters. And you said, oh, let's leave that down the road. And the other one is what happens to Bolinas Road. And I understand the logic of saying, look, postpone the most contentious issues because you'll never get anything done. But I want to throw out an analogy. In the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, if you pardon me for saying this, what they decided was we have to postpone all the contentious issues, Jerusalem, settlements, boundaries, right of return. Let's postpone them so we can get something done. They postponed them and nothing has gotten done. So I'm a little worried about this whole idea of postponing the most contentious issues to the end, because I don't know if you can really address the downtown element without sort of having some idea of what the consensus of the town is around those two most contentious issues. I just want to throw that out for people to think about.
Jane, I think you're going to get the last word.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. I wanted to propose a new pedestrian crossing, kind of by the dry cleaner from the park, because when there's an event there, or even farmers market, people they don't go one way or the other. They run between the traffic. And then the last thing is, so what's next? How do we, who are concerned about our various things, speak more about them?
That was the next, what's next slide? Put it on your calendar, Saturday, August 6th.
All right.
There ain't no meantime. We're
And
going to come back.
I should also mention, as part of the bicycle pedestrian plan update, there's a crossing there, and there's like with this little center refuge circle, so people can go part way and then the rest of the way. Just
right. What's next is we will take all these notes here, and we will write them down and add them to the list of issues and opportunities. And we will start preparing for the workshop on August 6th, which takes, not unlike this night, takes a lot of preparation to think through what the breakout groups will be, what are the materials necessary for those breakout groups, who will be the hands, who will, what are the more background information we have to provide for you all, so when you have the breakout groups, you can have learned discussions about real issues. So that's what's next, is we will take what you've said under consideration, modify the issues and opportunities list, which will be the starting point for the next workshop, and we have a lot of homework to do to prepare for that workshop.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you put those slides up again that show the next workshop?
Yeah.
All right. And I would also like to remind anybody who's not in this room, who might be accessing it on the website or through the recording, that you can send in emails.
Yes, thank you. If you want to email me, I'm Jay Moore, Town of Fairfax, and the video will live on. I think we're there, folks. I think you should all give yourself a round of applause. This is a great town. Thank you for coming.
Okay. And also, since this is an official meeting, and I would like to adjourn in memory of Robert Swift, who is the brother of Fairfax resident Cindy Swift. So.